In that meeting, we did vote to reject the bids on 4 Central Ave and send it back out for a rebid. And we voted to approve the contract with HMEA. No decision was made on the town administrator contract details. We did all agree on certain terms of it. I'm going to write it up and bring it back to the town administrator this week. With that, we are informing you that we will be video, audio taping, as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience wishing to video or audio tape must notify the chairman now. Hearing no one, please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. First up is weekly briefing. Anyone for weekly briefing? Public comment and announcement? Chris?
I'd like to go if the board would indulge. I was going to bring this up under town administrator announcements, but if I have the opportunity now, I know that we're doing a open house. I don't see Carolyn here tonight.
Right there.
She's in the back.
Is she?
If you walked in late.
Way in the back.
Oh, sorry, Carolyn.
She's not in her normal seat.
So I know that she may, yeah, she's not in her normal
Chris
seat.
took it.
Chris Nickerson, which doesn't look any resemblance to Carolyn. But I just wanted to, we did get a application in, and I know the board wanted me to find a way to facilitate getting the Cape Verdean Museum started. And they are a group that is in the process of formalizing their organization. So I did approve, as per the board's recommendation, that I be authorized to kind of get them started. So I've approved a contract with them for a year's worth of lease. Obviously, all these leases or agreements have the provision that if the town wanted to do something different with the building. In that provision, though, to kind of help them get started, we did, or I took the initiative to, we'll have 6 months of zero rent because they really do need startup money to get the museum going. And then in month 7, they'll have a $500 per month fee. They are taking the old administrative wing of the school, so the principals, the nurse's office, and I think guidance office, which is probably, well, definitely larger than a classroom, but not probably as big as 2 classrooms. So the $500, I think, is a fairly reasonable fee. So I know that at their function, I got up and announced that I would try to facilitate as much as I can. So we have received the formal application, and I have filled that out or have signed off on that on behalf of the town.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Just state your name and for the record.
Thank you. I am Barbara Burgo. I will be the curator of the Harwich Cape Verdean Museum and Cultural Center, we hope to call it. But I know you have a cultural center. And I wasn't sure if this was on the agenda today, but I know your town manager and Carolyn have been working diligently with us, and I thank you so much. And quickly, I thank everyone who came and participated in the function, the festival. It was wonderful, and you folks have been very supportive. I just wanted to let you know, yes, we are establishing. We met last week and had our first meeting for to get started with our 501c3. So, of course, we had to pick officers. Mr. Robert Cutts here, my baby brother, is going to be the president of the Cape Verdean Museum and Cultural Center. And I just wanted to say, because he will be too modest too, you folks maybe don't remember him or recognize him. He's been away and a sheriff in Virginia for 30 years, but he is the nephew of the Honorable late Eugenia Forts. And I will be vice president.
Great.
So we're drafting our articles of incorporation, started last week. August 1st will be our, official first date for our fiscal year. And with this, we're ready to move forward. We're looking for the insurance that we need as well, so we could, any help anyone could give us with that. And we're ready to go, and Carolyn has said we could just kind of open the doors, just say coming soon, open house, if that's okay with everyone. And I thank you immensely.
Great, thank you, and welcome. Anyone else for public comment and announcement? Consent agenda, Larry.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the following items. A, approve the minutes of June 5th, 2017, June 12th, 2017, June 19th, 2017, and July 10th, 2017 executive session. B, approve application for a one-day entertainment license for Harwich Conservation Trust for Wildlands Music and Art Stroll for September 9, 2017, and we waive the $25 entertainment license application fee, waive two $55 tent application fees, and approve use of Harbor Masters Bank Street Building parking lot. C, confirm approval of CAFR grant in the amount of $5,000 and authorize the town administrator to act as signatory. D, approve Caleb Chase fund request in the amount of $674.24 per the recommendation of the Council on Aging Social Services Coordinator. E, approve the award of contract for the drainage to Robert B. Auer Company Incorporated in the amount of $236,500. F, approve award for C&D trailer contract to KNL Holding LLC in the amount of $69,101. G, confirm appointment of Elaine, Zaida to Assistant Assessor's position in the Assessor's Department effective August 7th, 2017. H, rescind the reappointment of Robert Bradley as a Historic District / Historic Commission's representative on the Community Preservation Committee. I, confirm the appointment of Joe Powers as Historic District / Historic Commission's representative to the Community Preservation Committee. J, reappoint Matt Hart as a member of the Waterways Committee for a 3-year term.
Second.
Thank you.
Expiring.
It's not in there.
It's not on there.
It's not on there, but it's for a 3-year term.
Starting now.
Starting
in-
now.
Yeah, starting now.
No, starting now. Positions are positions. They expire when they expire, not when the person starts.
And just as a comment,
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Discussion.
Mike, do you or Chris want to comment on the grant of $5,000?
Chris, I was going to ask Chris to.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. I realize when we put it in there, CAFR actually stands for Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. It is a document that some communities that want to achieve a higher level of financial sophistication usually complete. It would be a nice basis point to complete for us as we pursue from going from a AA+ to a AAA. When we negotiated with the company to do the new auditors, Powers and Sullivan, we had asked them if they were capable of doing it. They did give us an estimate of $5,000. And at the same time, the state had a program out in which they were looking for grants for folks to come in and do innovative ideas. So this is something that they had in their wheelhouse. We applied for that grant. Actually, Ali Sabatino, our town planner, applied on the town's behalf, and we were awarded that grant. So it's $5,000 to complete an additional level of annual financial reporting that we would use as a basis for going after AAA. And to that end as well, the Lieutenant Governor is coming out tomorrow at 4 o'clock and will formally present the check to, most likely to the chair, and I'll just be there to answer any questions if people have in regards to what we applied for. But we applied for this grant and were awarded it. Probably just as a item of note, $5,000 is not a heck of a lot of money, but this does make us eligible for other grants. We were one of a few communities, or 70 communities, that had not signed up for this program that was near and dear to the governor and Lieutenant Governor's heart. So we signed up, and this should hopefully give us better eligibility for other grants that we are actively pursuing.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Don?
Yeah, two things. The first one, seriously, it's really 2 years, 11 months, and I'm not splitting hairs. We're going to be talking about things over the next few months that are that have to be cleaned up because of the way that appointments were made through the years. You could do either one. It's 2 years, 11 months, or June 30th, 2020 expiration, because it's the position that you're pointing to, not the person.
And we're referring to Matt Hart,
Matt Hart.
Yeah.
Waterways position.
June 30th of 2020.
Yeah. The second one is for the office staff.
Okay.
I'm agreeing to all the minutes with no changes.
Wow. Okay, any more discussion? All in favor?
Wait. If we're going to do that, what about Joe Powers and the CPC?
It's a one-year.
I mean, is it understood? These are all understood already, but if you're going to, you know what I'm saying? Like, we need to be consistent for all.
Well, now we're getting into a can of worms that's beyond the consent agenda, because the discussion I want to bring forward later from the interview committee is if there's ex officio positions that were not contemplated when the charter was first
So we'll
written.
stop there, we'll make a note of that, and we'll vote on this now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
We all
this
know
is
what
much
we
more complicated than that.
Thank you. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next up, public hearings and presentations. The first one we have is a public hearing. Larry, will you read the public hearing notice?
Let me just pull that up.
Number 12?
Notice is hereby given under Chapter 138 of the General Laws as amended that application has been made in this board for transfer of the seasonal common victor all alcoholic beverage license now held by the Commodore Inn Limited, known as Raspberry Restaurant, 30 Earl Road, West Harwich, Mass. 02671. Richard Jones, manager, to 30 Earl Road LLC, known as the Commodore Inn, 30 Earl Road, West Harwich, Mass. 02671. John Foley, manager, on the following described premises located at 30 Earl Road, West Harwich, Mass. It's 868 square feet indoor dining area, 4,800 square feet outdoor area, 4 entrances and exits. The Board of Selectmen will hold a hearing upon the application on Monday, July 24th, 2017, no earlier than 6:30 p.m. in the Don B. Griffin Room at Town Hall, 732 Main Street, Harwich, at which time all interested parties will be heard.
Thank you. Anyone here to speak for the applicant?
John Foley.
Good evening, John.
Good evening, everyone. John Foley, the new manager at the Commodore Inn. A lot of you know my wife, Barbara Ann. We've been in the inn business for about a month, and it's been fabulous. And we're just here tonight to have the existing license transferred to us and answer any questions that might be brought our way.
So there's a very detailed packet in our packet tonight. Does the board have any questions? Don? Janelle?
No.
Anyone in the public with any questions? Motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Can I get a motion on this?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the license transfer from the, for the Richard Jones manager at 30 Earl Road LLC, doing business as the Commodore Inn, 30 Earl Road, West Harwich, to John Foley as the manager on the present premises of 30 Earl Road in West Harwich.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the license transfer request. Any discussion?
John, are scones still going to be available?
For the season, yes. Yes. So, yes. Not tomorrow, though. Mr. Rendon's here this evening, and their daughter and grandson are going back, so there'll be no scones tomorrow, but John can answer to that.
Just
not me.
want to know I just want to know the critical item here.
Of course.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a nice evening.
Next up is a presentation of the Barnstable County Community Septic Loan Program. Chris, why don't you give us a quick overview on why we're here?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll give them an opportunity to come up. You can sit at the table. We do have a mic up there that is an area mic. Just in terms of last year when we approached, or this past May, when we approached town meeting about our sewer program. There was a fairly good contingent of people that were concerned about how do we address the issue of the town is going to spend, as part of Phase 2, money to put sewer in the road, but how do we get the sewer from the road into the individual homeowners? And in Chatham, the experience they've had is between $5,000 and $7,000 has been the expenditure that people have had in order to connect. And some of the residents that attended some of the public meetings indicated that they were having a hard time getting a home equity loan, or they said, what are other avenues that are available to the community to be able to address that need to hook up? So I actually started to explore and had come across that the county already has a program. I think there was some sentiment that maybe we should start our own. I don't believe that duplication is ever necessarily a good thing. And if there is a program that is basically modeled on what we would be doing anyway, I think that makes sense to pursue. And we did ask the folks from the county to come out and kind of explain how the program works and how people would be eligible or not eligible, and maybe some of the parameters of the program.
Welcome. So we have a new mic on the table. We're going to try it. If it doesn't work, we're going to run over with one of these mics.
Okay, sounds great.
Just speak as loud as you can without yelling. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much. My name is Sean O'Brien. I'm the director of the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment. With me tonight is George Hoyfelder, who's the director of the Alternative Septic System Test Center, and Kendall Ayers, who's the administrator for the septic loan program. We just wanted to say thank you for having us in tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to Kendall.
If you don't mind, I have some handouts for you. It's a brochure, an application. It's quite simple.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As Sean mentioned, my name is Kendall Ayers. I'm the administrator of the septic loan program. To start off, actually, the town of Harwich years ago actually went to town meeting to borrow money. I think you borrowed $400,000 on the 2 occasions, maybe $600,000 total, back in the early 2000s. And
Before my time, so.
it was, Barnstable County was the administrator of all the towns in Cape Cod, including Harwich. But it was a burden for many towns to keep this thing going. We would admit it, you'd borrow the money, you'd transfer the money to Barnstable County, we'd spend all the money, take care of all the paperwork, send all the paperwork back to you, and then you folks had a bill on your property taxes. Good program, cumbersome program. So what happened is back in 2006, Barnstable County, with the permission of all of the towns on the Cape, including Harwich, began to borrow money from the Water Pollution Abatement Trust, then it's now the Clean Water Trust. We borrowed originally $30 million, and we have had principal paid back that we're loaning out right now, so we're close on $40 million in loans since 2006. Which is around 3,500 loans total. The program is a 5% interest rate loan payable over a 20-year term. Now, what exactly does this cover relative to sewer hookups? The simple answer is everything. Everything that's directly related to the sewer hookup. So that's starting with the permitting part of it. Of course, the hookup from the pipe from the house up to the street is covered. Incidentals, if there's a need for a grinder pump, for example, that's covered. If the existing septic system is in the backyard, the plumbing within the basement will need to be rerouted. We'll cover that cost. We'll cover the cost of the abandonment of the existing system as well. If your lawn gets torn apart, we can pay for the repair of it. Same with the driveway. Anything and everything that is related to the sewer hookup is covered. The way this works is, well, there's the application. I gave you a copy of the application. I think you can see it's quite a simple document, single page, front and back. A homeowner can go to our website, barnstable-county-septic-loan.org. They can see frequently asked questions. They can fill out an application there, print it out, send it in to us. We review it. We do a title search. If there aren't any problems, we can approve someone within 24 hours. We notify the homeowner that their application has been approved. And then from there, we ask if they have received bids from contractors to start the process. If not, we suggest that they get heading in that direction. Once they have chosen a contractor, they would sign the contract as an agreement of that. They would send it off to us. We would prepare a betterment agreement for the homeowner to sign, mail that off to them. Once we get that back, and that allows us to pay the contractors, and not until we get the betterment agreement signed can we start paying anyone. We notify the contractor that Barnstable County is going to be covering the cost of the sewer connection, and the project is underway. It's really that straightforward. When the job is done, we cannot make the final payment until we get something from the DPW stating that the installation took place in accordance with local requirements. At that point in time, when the job is complete, we record a notice of betterment assessment at the Registry of Deeds, and we start billing. That's the basic process. There will be money available. There's money available now. There will be money available in the future. And it really is as straightforward as I hope to make it sound.
Sounds very straightforward.
Yeah.
Questions? I'll start with Larry.
Thanks again, Kendall and George, and everyone for coming. So you're specifically saying that this loan could be used for connection fees from the town to a collection for us going into Chatham. Doesn't have to be a sewer septic tank replacement.
Correct.
It can be used for that.
Correct, yes.
The same can be said of alternative systems, so we get to that. It can be used for those funds.
I should say that of the $40 million that was loaned out, we've covered, of course, conventional septic system upgrades, but IA system, innovative alternative systems, and sewer hookups. So any and all of that we can cover. And as far as residential, it's 100% residential, this program. But that's anything, primary residence, investment properties, summer homes, rental properties, condominiums, anything residential.
Okay. The maximum loan is 5% for 20 years,
That's correct.
what you're saying. And that's payment that's tax deductible, those payments, if I read this?
I'm not sure I want to go in that direction. We every March, April, a lot of people call us and ask us how much interest they paid the past year, so I think that was
Okay.
their intent.
And I think, George, you commented at one of our collaborative meetings that it may not be, in recent years, it may not be used quite as much as you hope, because 5% is not much better than you can get from a bank.
Right.
Is there any hope of making that more attractive? You know, lowering the rate, or let me ask another option. Is there a way that if us as a town wanted to make it more attractive, help those connecting, that we could add to that to lower the rate? Is there any mechanisms to help make that attractive for those? That was a major issue of us on our discussion on getting through was.
One thing that, firstly, you saw the application, it's really simple. We do a title search where we don't do a credit check per se. So we deal with a lot of people that have had credit issues in the past. So I'm not sure that they can go to the bank to get a line of credit.
Okay.
You know, so we catch a lot of people that would otherwise fall through all the safety nets out there. We, as I mentioned, we have borrowed $30 million. We're using the principal that has been repaid to us. At this point, when we go back to borrow from the Clean Water Trust in the future, 3 years from now, whenever, we were borrowing at a 0%, we will be borrowing at a 2%, and we'll be loaning out at 4%. So somewhere down the road, near term, it will drop from 5% back to 4%, or down to 4%, if that helps you out.
Anything that lowers, that makes it, useful for people connecting us is my
Of course.
goal at the
Understand
moment.
that.
Yeah, it's not a secret, right?
Thank you, Larry. Julie?
Yeah, I think it's a great program, and so glad you have it. In terms of the payment, is there like a payment book that people receive, or is it, debit? I mean, how do they make the payments?
We send off an amortization schedule once the job is done, so people will know what to assume. By the way, it's on like a mortgage where the payments are level. Our principal is level, but it's at declining interest.
Okay.
So immediately you start paying less on your interest.
Mhm.
And if you make an additional payment, that goes toward the principal, so you further will reduce your interest amount. At this point in time, we bill directly in paper, but we're in the process of working things out, so we're going to be near term doing electronic billing, and people will be able to pay with credit cards and debit cards and electronic checks, those types of things.
Okay. And because of the recording information, obviously, that balance would get taken care of if a property were to transfer.
There is an option for the buyer of the property to assume the outstanding obligation.
Oh, okay.
That needs to be in writing from Barnstable County prior to the transfer of the title. But mostly, if someone's buying a property and they're going through a bank, the lender wants to slate
Just
clean, so
settle
our
it anyway,
loan gets
right.
paid off. But there is a possibility of an assumption.
Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
Thank you. Janelle?
No, thank you for doing that.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming in, but just one question, because we're looking at it from one direction. I'm trying to look at it from the other. When there's a main, everybody has to hook up. So the question I have is, does everybody who submits to get the loan, get approved for the loan?
Pretty much, if you're not current with your property taxes, if there's something, if you have outstanding executions that haven't been addressed, it takes a lot to not get approved. So
But there is a potential to not get approved.
it's very small. Right? We're 99.9% approved.
So we're probably going to have to address that because everybody's got to hook up along the main. It's not just people who can afford to.
Thank you, Bill. Chris?
I do think, though, where this is structured, Mr. Chairman, as a betterment process, that because there is a lien against the property, that, you know, this makes where I can see where your loan rate would be 99, or approval rate would be 99.9%. So I just, in terms of, at least from what I got from feedback, folks in the town of Chatham, which is well ahead of us in terms of having a sewer plant already and having people hooked up, I think most of the folks in Chatham have actually been able to do it through the private sector, through their home equity loans. So, you know, our first round here will be about 600 homes. So, you know, it may only be 5 or 10% of the people that I would think would want to use this. But people were concerned that if they were not eligible for a home equity loan, they could still get a loan through, in terms of house values and that interconnect.
Sure. I mean, we have a default rate with our loan, with our $40 million out there. It's not a high default rate, 2.5% in some cases. We are very proactive in going after people, trying to encourage them to make payments to us. We have an attorney we work with, but again, if we know someone is really going to have a hard time paying us because of their past history, they may not get a loan from us, but it's rare. The vast majority of people get loans from us. We're here to help people out. We understand that. We're not trying to make it difficult at all.
Thank you. Chris, anything else?
Also.
Anyone else?
No, fine.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
There was one other thing of consideration when you start to think about extending a sewer is those properties that are, you have a plan, it's out 3 years. Now what happens if Joe or Mary has a failing septic system? You don't want them to put that capital on the ground, so we also, as a department, have assisted towns in that transition, and that would be somebody's got 2 cesspools, you know they're going to be hooked up to the sewer in 2 years. The cesspools have some problems to them, or they're selling the property, and the bank says, hey, we don't want to see 2 cesspools there. We've helped towns, Falmouth and Provincetown, transition by allowing or working with the Board of Health on what a workable solution would be to get them by, satisfy the bank so that the property can transfer, so it doesn't lock up everything. And that usually involves putting in a quick fix, which might be use the existing cesspools, pump on the schedule, put an alarm at 2/3 of the height of it. All that is sort of can be a tracking nightmare for Board of Health. So we will offer the assistance as you go forward with this to the Board of Health to track those. We have a tracking program for instance, all your alternative systems in town. You have 35 or so, and we track those for the towns, all the maintenance contracts, what are required for things. So we're just make you aware that when you go into that transitional period, there may be a time when that's kind of needed, when your Board of Health will be allowing substandard systems to continue to be used, simply because you don't want people dumping capital on the ground. We'll also be very careful in that regard to watch where your plans go so that we don't receive a loan request for somebody to put a system in that area.
That's a great service. Thank you.
Yeah,
Chris?
just to that end, it's a good opportunity, a good lead-in, that we currently have survey crews that are on the ground now that are outgoing and doing survey points to folks at their individual sill levels, so we can see whether we need grinder pumps or they could do it with gravity. And in the review of that, I mentioned about 600 homes. Some of those homes, that number will fluctuate a little bit, because if we have a neighborhood that we can hook up through gravity, as opposed to a neighborhood that we may need to have grinder pumps in, there is going to be some flexibility to those properties that we hook up in that area. We certainly published a map that showed the approximate area, and it is an approximate area. But if people do have a failing septic system and we can do it through gravity, I think we wouldn't mind kind of catching those in the next 2 years, as opposed to waiting 5 or even 20 years, as Phase 8 is 20 years out, more than 20 years out. So to that point, I think if people, when the survey crews come through, or they want to at least acknowledge, we already have maps on the website, that they're in that area, please let us know, and we'll see if we can make some accommodations to those homes. Ultimately, the plan is to clean up the environment. So if we have those properties that are in that state, we might as well try to capture that if possible.
Absolutely sense.
Great. Thank you, and thanks for coming. Thank the county for all your services. And I'd like to recognize Jack Units in the back, the county administrator. Thanks for your support.
Thank you, Kendall.
Okay, next up is a presentation, Lower County Road Status Update. Lincoln Hooper. That not work, Jamie?
It was worth a shot.
Okay.
You're good. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Chair. Link Hooper, DPW Director. November of 2015, I proposed the reconstruction of Lower County Road as a standalone project to address a number of deficiencies with the roadway. Failing road, failing drainage systems, non-compliant ADA sidewalk for the entire 2.2-mile length, et cetera. At that time, I described that the scope and size and magnitude of that project was outside of what we could handle in-house utilizing our county bids. Our county bids are items that we use to pave, resurface, reconstruct roads, that type of thing. There would be so many different items that go into a project of this size that it would be logistically nearly impossible to manage as we do and Mr. Nickerson does with other roads. I also described that Lower County Road, although eligible for state and federal funding under the Transportation Improvement Program, that I did not think it was a good candidate because the cross-section to meet the complete street standards is a minimum of 45 feet without design exceptions, and we have a 40-foot right-of-way on Lower County Road. During that meeting as well, I suggested that the DPW and the engineering departments could do the survey and the engineering for this road and save ourselves a couple $100,000. It was well-intended, and I wanted to save some money and thought we could embark on that. Unfortunately, neither the DPW nor the engineering department ended up having enough spare time to allocate to this project to keep it moving forward, hopefully construction in FY19. To address that problem, I met with Mr. Clark, and we hired a guy named Tom Ackerblum, Mass DOT senior engineer, and the guy who's responsible for building and overseeing our Route 137 corridor project. I had the privilege of working with Mr. Ackerblum for about 2 years during that project. I was extremely impressed with him. And when I saw Lower County Road, we needed some outside assistance. I called him and he was willing to help. If it pleases the board, I'd like to turn the mic over to Mr. Ackerblum to talk about how he's developed the cost estimate that is before you and the scope of services for the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks. I'm Tom Ackerblum from Engineering Inspection Services, and it's nice to meet you all. It's good to be with you tonight, and look forward to answering your questions. I trust you had the package with the scope of work, and fire away.
Chris,
Maybe just to get things started, I know we put in the capital plan and the capital budget an initial estimate of, I know we put in the capital plan an initial estimate of $4 million. Now you're at $5.4 million. That obviously gets the attention of finance people when you have that kind of increase. Can you kind of walk us through what you
Sure.
saw on the ground and the reason for that?
Yeah, I went out, I don't know, some of you may have seen a strange-looking guy last summer walking around on Lowell County Road with a measuring wheel. And so what I did was, based on what Lincoln wanted me to prepare for a proposal, I put together the contract items that would be necessary to complete the work that he wanted done. And the next step is to sit down and then develop the pricing structure to perform those items of work. And the pricing structure is based on the Mass DOT's weighted average bid prices, which is a list of pricing that everyone uses. It's current within the previous 12 months. It's a statewide average of probably hundreds of projects, and the average prices for each item are taken into account. And that's how you develop an overall office cost estimate for a project like this.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board? We'll start with Larry.
I think this question is probably more for Link. You suggest that you could do this work if you had the time, but you have, fair enough, but this is an expensive project. Would it be better to do this and let some of the other, I mean, how did you prioritize this to put the other work in front of it, is my question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ballantyne, I'm not following your question.
You said you initially suggested you could do this work in-house.
Okay.
But in looking at it, you didn't have the time nor resources to do it. My question is, one of the priorities, this is an expensive project, would it be better to do this and let something else go?
My original intent was to develop this as I've seen other projects developed, such as 137. This is very similar to the 137, smaller in scope, but all the same components are there. How those have been developed is every last inch of the project gets engineered. So you go out, you do a complete survey of everything, you do quantities, estimates, and then you put everything down in engineered plans, and you put the engineers, and you put that to the street and get that bid. That process to get to that point would probably be, and this is usually 10% of the project estimate, so we'd probably be looking at $300,000 to $400,000 to do that. When I contacted Mr. Ackerblum about doing this, he suggested doing it as he has for the last 30 years at MassDOT and developed what's called a book job. This is the book. This book is what you would give prospective contractors to bid. In this book contains all the items that you have in a 5-page spreadsheet, every last item, every catch basin, every piece of curbing, every transition, and so forth. Doing that type of reconnaissance was more than the engineering department nor the DPW could allocate resources for. It was beyond what we could do and keep the project moving in a normal fashion. Okay. With that, I took the problem to Mr. Clark to discuss our options, and we thought hiring Mr. Ackerblum to develop this as a book job was the answer.
Thank you, Link. Larry?
No, there's no more.
Julie?
Yeah, I just have a question in terms of, is any part of this project possibly eligible for any type of state or federal grants, maybe ADA or anything like that?
Every bit, the one grant program I am aware of, which is the Transportation Improvement Program, TIP, through the MPO, comes with strings, and those strings mean complete streets, which is 5.5-foot sidewalks on both sides, 5-foot bike lanes on both sides, and 12-foot travel lanes, equals a 45-foot cross-section. With having a 40-foot right-of-way, I did not think that was a candidate. I'm not aware of anything other, but usually those types of monies come with strings attached. And we can't build the cross-section that we want to build, which is we want to just replace the road that's there and make the sidewalk ADA compliant.
And do you know if there's anything through the county that could help with us, any of this?
I don't believe there's a county grant program. One of the things that I think we do piggyback on is they do a bid process, a combined bid process. So we're not just going out as a town of Harwich. I think we're using quantities that we would get through the county bid as a mechanism to try to decrease the cost of the project.
Kind of right. When Mr. Ackerblum came out with this cost estimate, developed the way he develops projects at MassDOT, I was shocked. The number really grew and got my attention. Chris Nickerson, who's our road manager, manages those county contracts that Mr. Clark's talking about. I had him go through and I said, pick out those big items and apply our pricing structure that we get through the county to those large items. That exercise alone yielded $500,000 in potential savings. As well as he has a contingency in there, which we're not allowed to when we apply for state Chapter 90 projects. We don't have the contingencies involved. That's another $500,000. It's my feeling that this project, as I committed to writing, will come in significantly less than the office estimate, both from my experience on the 137 project. That project had an initial office estimate of $4.7 million. The bids came in at $4 million. This here, I feel it will probably come in around, the truth's always somewhere in the middle. I think it's closer to our intuitive number that we had the assistance of a local contractor. I think a project like this is going to solicit some very competitive bids from some local contractors.
Okay, thank you.
Janelle?
Have we allocated monies for this already?
Yes.
That was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, actually, maybe if I have an opportunity to comment on that. We have a road program that we generate about $1.4 million a year to try to maintain the road system. I think actually you approved some of the structure contracts for some of the drainage tonight even. But that $1.4 million, we had about $700,000 comes from Chapter 90, and then we usually put about $700,000 into each year to maintain the road. We do that as a short-term borrowing, about 5 years, so as things fall off, we add things so we can kind of perpetuate that. It has a lesser of a tax impact on the residents. When Link came and said, I have a $4 million project, I mean, we'd have to go on hiatus for 3 years doing any other road to try to do this. So it was programmed into the capital budget this year for FY19, for next year, that we would do this as a potential debt exclusion. And because the dollars are just too large, we don't want to forego doing, I think we have, what, almost 150 miles of public roads that we need to maintain, and we only have $1.5 million to do. I mean, we're always going to be behind, is the way, unfortunately, the reality of this business is. So we will select, the town of Brewster did something similar where they had several projects that they wanted to do. So they went to their voters and asked for the opportunity to do some of the bigger roads. So here is an opportunity that we feel that it's just too big of a project to try to absorb under Chapter 90. So we would go to the voters and say, as a debt exclusion is what we had in the plan for last year, that the board will be asked to vote this coming year.
And then the engineering costs that we originally thought we were gonna save, they did add up to about 250,000.
Yeah, if I could comment on that a little bit. I think Link commented, but just to elaborate, you know, one of the things that we try to look at is how do we do a project and do it very cost effectively as we can. I think in this case, by not doing the TIP program and getting people, we won't get through the politics of getting it done. So it doesn't make sense to pursue TIP. In this, and just looking at some of the material, I think we were contemplating initially a full-depth reconstruction on the 2.25 miles of roadway. When we had Mr. Ackerblum come in, he literally, I don't know if he walked the entire stretch or drove the entire stretch, but he looked at the entire stretch. And what he actually came out, I mean, some of this terminology, maybe people, you know, unless you're in this business, but doing full depth on, I think it was about 3/4 of a mile, no, about 1 mile of it. And now it just says a resurfacing and milling on a mile. So instead of potentially 2.25 miles of full depth, and what full depth means is going down about 18 inches, redoing the whole thing, he found that the base is sufficient, that there's no signs of sufficient wear in the deeper parts of it, and he's able to do a mill. So as bad as this number is, I don't think I said this to him when I first saw him, I like to keep people honest, it probably could have been a lot worse. So I think the number that's come in is a more realistic assessment of what we actually have on the ground. And I think just our engineering department, just we have a lot of work that we've been assigning to them, and this project was a little bit too big. So I think by having Mr. Ackerblum come in and do this work, it's been a cost-effective approach. And I think this estimate, I'm hoping that Mr. Hooper's right and it's high. I'm always hoping that the numbers come in too high. You know, the estimates are high and the actual budget comes in lower. But I think that hopefully would be the case here, but it could be a lot worse. So I think under the circumstances, I think good due diligence has been exhibited in this project, and it does make sense to pursue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a general statement, we've had our share of estimates through the years that wind up being exceeded when we go out to bid. So, I mean, I'd just like to give you a pat on the back for taking a conservative approach where you're confident that whatever estimate you're giving is going to be less when you go out to bid than more. So, as a methodology, I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I'd just like to mention that in the competitive bid pricing, in the way the process works, it is best public agency practice to set up a bid for a list of items like this using the weighted average bid price system that MassDOT produces for us here in Massachusetts. And Mr. Hooper's statement that the project will come in considerably less is a reasonable assumption. I mean, when the bid document is put out there for everybody to bid on, the prospective bidders will get the office estimate of what the project will cost, but that's when they go to work and sharpen their pencils in their offices everywhere. And this is where the competition to you know, get the award begins. And a project with this dollar figure will invite a considerable number of bidders. And I propose to write in the bid document, should you decide to go forward, that all the prospective bidders be pre-approved by MassDOT, so you have at least you will get the best group of contractors out there to come in and do the bidding on this. If local contractors, you know, they become aware of this through local speak or whatever, find out that they're going to have to be pre-qualified, then it will be up to them to go and get themselves pre-qualified. You want qualified people out there doing this work. It's an important roadway in your town, and you want it to come out correctly. And so the competitive bid price structure and the way it works is the best public agency approach to put together a proposal for a road like this in your town. And you know, where that will fall, you're looking, as Chris said, the work bid items are approximately, you know, right now we have it at 4.5. Now, where is that going to come in? 3-5% below that? Maybe it'll come in right on. But you want to take this approach because you don't want the other thing to happen, as you mentioned, sir, where you put out a bid and you have a cost estimate and it comes in above that. Now everything comes to a stop, and you're back at the tables and the meeting tables, you know, where we go from here. So once again, with the structure the way it's set up, it's the best public agency approach as to how to set up a cost estimate for a project like this. And most times, and since the establishment of the database, and we have that, is it does come in less than the office estimate. I hope that might clarify that a little bit for you.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Larry?
No, I have none.
Julie? So, Link, obviously you wouldn't be before us if this road wasn't important and in very bad shape. Is there potential to phase this project, or is it only going to cost more to phase it?
As proposed, it would probably take 2 construction seasons. I really try to avoid phasing because you're just prolonging the disruption, and things never get cheaper. They never get cheaper. You know, when we were doing the 137 project, MassDOT, not Mr. Ackerblum, their planning department, saw that the office estimate came in like $700,000. We had to plug that hole. We did with a combination of some local money, cutting back some things on the project, and we got the MPO to vote some extra money that was they had at their discretion to plug that hole. Then a bid came out, and we didn't need to do any of that exercise. But I really did not want to fragment that project, even though that was MassDOT's desire at that time. Don't know why I'm pointing to you, no longer MassDOT. I just think it inconveniences people longer and for very little savings.
Well, I appreciate the 1 million in savings, roughly, your guess on savings, you know, the contingency as well as the 500,000. But My concern is what we're going to the voters for again. You know, 20 million in wastewater and another 5 million on a road on Lower County. So I would ask you, do you think this road really needs to be done in 2019? That's question one, and then question two is what's next? What do we need to do? What do you need from us next?
Your support through the next year of the process to put this in front of the voters.
And can this project wait, Link?
I'd like to defer to Mr. Nickerson, if I may, on that. He's the road guru.
Good
Good
evening.
evening, Chris Nickerson,
Hey,
Road
Chris.
Manager for Harwich Highway. Currently, the failing drainage systems, I'm sure most of you witnessed in the last rainstorm, severe flooding in the Allen Harbor area, Brooks Road area, Waquasit Road area. If you look closely, coming down would be the south side of Lower County in the Howard Port area near CVS. You'll see framing grates that are 4 to 5 inches below the road surface. Systems are collapsing underneath the sidewalk. There's several now that we have filled full of stone and paved over because we're hoping that this project gets approved and we don't have to put money in the ground now to rip it out in 2 years.
Okay.
Also spending currently about $20,000 to $25,000 a year just Band-Aiding the existing asphalt surface, trying to keep it together
Okay.
in order to get us to that point and not end up with a dirt road between now and then.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Question.
Janelle?
I just have a question about the item on the consent agenda tonight for the drainage
Yes?
contract that we did approve.
Mhm.
Where is that for?
That is for our current road maintenance program that's published. We have a 5-year plan published. I used that for the next 4 roads up this year. Prep those surfaces for new pavement. I put in new drainage. In the asphalt industry, they say the 4 things to make a good road. The first 3 are where's the water gonna go? The last one's where's the money gonna come from? So standing water on a paved road is the worst thing you can do to it. We use that to prep the roads that are getting new surfaces with drainage. I also have what I call my quote-unquote fire list. I run around town solving drainage issues that residents call, make us aware of. We go out, validate their complaints. They get on a priority list. When I became road manager the better part of 18 years ago, it was about a 5-year wait. I've got it down, I shouldn't say we've got it down now I can get to 95% of them within a year.
So these are various
Vari-
catch basins throughout the town? It's
Various
not a
throughout the
specific
town as
street?
well as as part of our paving plan.
Okay. And then I have one more question.
Okay.
Link, you had said that this Lower County would take 2 construction seasons. Can you just define what a construction season is, please?
That would be a fall until hot mix plants close, and a spring as soon as the hot mix plants open, up until June, the very beginning of June. We don't allow any work to happen. Usually we don't allow work to take place after the kids get out of school, which is generally like the 3rd week in June. Starts to get busy around here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, just, Mr. Chairman, to your question earlier about timing, Mr. Hooper will submit a capital budget request probably at the end of August, beginning of September, and we'll have that in the program. So the timing would be voted on when the capital budget gets voted, ultimately in December.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the Capital Outlay Committee or Finance Committee? I don't know, one or the other, the tour you had.
It was
Capital Outlay.
Capital Outlay Committee did the tour.
Yeah, they came out, it's hard to distinguish the 2 committees sometimes. They came out and
Not in my
viewed.
mind, but. Sorry.
They came out a few weeks ago, I think, maybe it was a month ago at this point, and viewed some of the road. And when you get out there and walk it, and even if you park at CVS and just walk a quarter mile, I mean, even the layperson can tell this road's in tough shape and really needs their support.
Great. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you. Board's all set.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just add one more thing, just to expand on what Mr. Nickerson was saying, and you had a very good question about whether the project could wait. The 2 sections of the project that need full-depth reconstruction now, of course, will continue to deteriorate. The subsurface is failing badly, and certainly to the eye, anybody that looks at it, we call it alligatoring. The road is all alligating, falling apart. But the middle section as well, that is capable of just being milled, filled, we call it now. The longer that waits, you may end up in a situation where you'd have to take that out as well. And as Link alluded to, you know, the cost element that would go with that and the rising costs, so something to consider as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next up is the Harwich Big Fix 2018. Sorry, I'd like to welcome Laura Reckford and David Quinn.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Clark. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. I'm Laura Reckford from Housing Assistance Corporation. I'm here with my colleague David Quinn, also from Housing Assistance Corporation. Many of you know HAC. It's a 43-year-old 501c3 nonprofit based here on the Cape. We offer a range of housing services for people in all 15 towns on Cape Cod, as well as Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. We're here tonight to talk about our Big Fix annual event, which we'd like to bring to Harwich in 2018. We have a brief PowerPoint. We'll have a couple of bits of additional information, and then we're available for questions.
Great.
So we'll start the PowerPoint. So Housing Assistance Corporation, actually the top of the PowerPoint seems to be missing. I don't know if it can be, okay, that's fine. What that says is the Big Fix is community. So this is a community service event that we do annually on the Cape. We've actually done it in 7 towns on the Cape so far. This year will be our 8th year, and next year would be our 9th year. We've done it in the towns of Barnstable, Yarmouth, Dennis, Brewster, Mashpee, Bourne, Sandwich. This year is Falmouth, and next year we'd like to bring it to Brewster. Next slide, please. Harwich, excuse me, Harwich. We did Brewster last year.
Well, they used to.
They already had it once.
They used to be part of us, I understand.
So the vision of this event is to make home and landscaping improvements that will enhance the comfort, safety, and quality of life for seniors, the disabled, and veterans on Cape Cod and the islands. We engage community volunteers in performing the work at homes selected to receive assistance. Next slide, please. Okay, and so outcomes, very happy people, tears of joy on that day. It's really a wonderful community service event. We do things like build handicap ramps, help people with projects where they weren't able to finish the project because of lack of funds or a contractor that didn't return, things like that. It can be a range of things from cleaning out gutters, projects that people just can't do anymore, and they don't have anyone to help them with them. Next slide, please. Big Fix volunteers. We tend to attract in past years more than 250 volunteers to this event. Groups from Boy Scouts, Coast Guard crews, crews from Rotary, banks, families, businesses, teenagers, and of course, very essential to this, licensed contractors. They volunteer their time, electricians, plumbers, landscapers, roofers. We can use, as I always tell people, anyone who can use a rake can help us on this day, but licensed contractors are particularly helpful. Next slide, please. Sponsors. We couldn't do this without our sponsors. Heroes in Transition, which is a nonprofit out of Mashpee, helps us to pay for the supplies for all our veterans' houses on that day, and helping veterans is really a priority that day. Next slide, please. 99 Restaurant, for the past several years, they've been providing a free lunch to all of our volunteers that day, so we'll be looking for a lunch sponsor next year if we are doing it here in Harwich. Next slide. Whole Foods, for the past 3 years, Whole Foods has been supplying a free breakfast to all the volunteers that day. Next slide, please. And so other people who have been contributing to this event costs us more than $50,000 every year to do this. And so we do go out for grants for sponsors, and we've even put together something called a Fix-a-thon, where volunteers who are helping us that day, or even those who can't make it that day, can help us raise money for this event. For the past several years, TD Bank Foundation has contributed to this event. We also this year had the funds from the Cape Cod Foundation. We're talking to other groups about sponsoring this event. And in past years, towns have also contributed to this event. With the year that we were in Yarmouth, the Affordable Housing Trust helped us with the event. There are other types of town dollars that have sometimes been contributed to this event over the years. So the final slide is that plaque that we have, and we'd certainly like to add Harwich's name to the plaque for 2018. Couple other things about the event. You saw on the first slide it said the date to be determined. I noticed that you folks do have a fall festival. We don't want to be on the same weekend as the fall festival. So our suggested date is Saturday, September 22nd, which is the fourth Saturday in September, but we'd like to certainly talk to town officials about that and the Chamber of Commerce about that date. More information about volunteers. As I said, we look for skilled and unskilled volunteers. We really couldn't do this event without volunteers contributing. And they do, as I said, a range of tasks: weeding, pruning hedges, raking, hauling brush, moving heavy and bulky items. But we even have them doing some specialty projects in past years. Last year, as I mentioned earlier, there was a senior citizen who had part of the side of her home shingled. The contractor left, didn't come back. We had someone come and was able to finish up that job. Another person last year, a woman who had a son who was recently returned, a veteran returned from Afghanistan with PTSD. We were able to help repair a part of her roof, and that ended up having really a wonderful effect because she was in danger of foreclosure, and the bank agreed to modify the loan based on that roof repair. So even small things during this one-day event can really have a big impact on someone's life.
Right. Dave Quinn, also with Housing Assistance Corporation. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about sort of the process that we go through to select the houses that we actually go work at. So typically in early spring, late winter, early spring is when we start putting the word out to let people know that they can apply to receive some assistance on their home. So we work with basically anyone who's an income eligible senior, veteran, or disabled member of the community would be able to apply. We work with many different community groups in the town to get the word out. So for example, in Falmouth right now, we're working with Falmouth Senior Center, Veteran Services Department, Falmouth Disabilities Commission, Falmouth Human Services. So we would do something very similar in Harwich, basically try to partner with as many local organizations, nonprofits, and town departments that we could to really get the word out, in addition to social media, really letting people know that this is an opportunity for them to have some volunteers come help work on their home. And that the whole goal is basically to be able to allow people to stay in their homes who may not be able to afford to do the work needed to stay in their homes. In Falmouth this past year, we also were invited by the town moderator to speak at town meeting. So that was a great opportunity for us to talk about the big fix, what it means, and how important it is to the community. And just to give you an idea of how much interest there's been, this year in Falmouth we actually have around 65 applications from residents interested in getting help with their home. Unfortunately, we can't do that many homes. Our goal is probably around 15. So right now we're in the process of looking through each of the applications, doing follow-up phone calls, doing house visits to try to get a sense of how we can serve the most in need. And typically what we find when we go do those house visits is that there are sometimes a lot more needs than are actually listed on the application. So somebody might say they need help with raking their yard or doing some brush, and we get there and we actually see they need work on their deck or on their roof, or really more essential things that we can maybe help out with. And the other thing is just, I think the important thing that has made this event a success in the past is the partnership with the towns that we work with. So we want to have a good relationship with the town, and in the past we've had great conversations with the department heads that were able to provide help in terms of providing trash removal for some of the sites, working with the town on police details depending on where the sites are. So we would be back at some time next year, once we're further along in the process with Harwich, to kind of go through the list of where all of our sites are, and try to work with the town to find ways that we could work together to make the event a success. But tonight we're really just here to kind of give you an update on our plans, and would hope that you would support this event. And also, we'd love to invite you to our event in Falmouth, which is on Saturday, September 16th. And so that would be sort of a ceremonial passing of the hammer, we call it. So that's an opportunity at the Falmouth event. As next year's town, would love to have you there to sort of be the recipients of the hammer for next year. But with that, any questions, would be happy to answer.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Janelle?
I think it's a great program, and you answered all the questions I had. I will say, though, that September 16th is our Cran Jam Cranberry Harvest, so I don't know, I mean, I'm certainly not leaving Harwich that day, unfortunately, because I want to be part of the celebration, but just so you know, if, there were fewer of us.
That's why I had suggested the next weekend, the 24th,
For next year.
actually,
Oh,
for
for
next
next year.
year to the 4th.
No,
for
but I'm
this
so,
year.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
Falmouth,
yeah,
okay.
for the passing of the
Falmouth.
hammer, yeah.
Okay,
It's just so you know.
okay, great, thank you.
I can come get the hammer.
Okay.
Don? You all set? Julie?
I'm all set.
Larry?
No, I'm just happy that someone that can use a rake is welcome. You don't want my carpentry skills.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having
Thank you
us.
for
Thank you.
accepting Harwich, yes. Okay, next up under old business, part-time housing coordinator and establishment of a housing trust. We have Bob Lawton and Mary Wagon. Did I say it right? I definitely did. Did I do it right, Mary?
We don't care about that.
Welcome and thank you.
Thanks for inviting us. So I'm not sure what you had in your packet.
Yeah, maybe,
we
Mr.
don't-
Chairman, just to help out Bob, we had a discussion in which I provided a kind of a simple overview of our discussion, and it is a model that I was excited about. I think it's a model that is efficient and effective for government, which doesn't always occur. But I thought that there was some questions about how does it work in practice. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you set it up, your experience, and the one thing that caught my attention, your success rate. You've been able to really do some good work on a consistent basis. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Okay, Mary can talk about some of the specifics, but in general, we started the program in 2007. We adopted a bylaw and a section of the general law, Chapter 4455C, which describes what the rules and regulations are, what the authority of the trust is. We have 5 members on our board. The town administrator is the chair of the board, and then there's 1 member of the Board of Selectmen, 1 member of the Community Preservation Committee, 1 member of the Housing Committee. We have a separate Housing Committee that does policy work, and then there's 1 citizen on the board. We have been successful, I think, to the tune of we've done 13 buy-down home ownership projects, 3 new construction of housing on town land. Habitat for Humanity did 6 units, 6, and then townwide rental, 6 units. We had another rental unit which we contracted with someone for 3 units. And then we have the ready renter list, which has 15. We have 2 major projects going on now. One is the Cavalier Motel, which has been in the paper. That's a demolition of the motel, and then we are putting in $2 million at $30,000 a unit to do 69 units of affordable housing. Our second one is the Yarmouth Gardens. A little bit different way we did that. We put out to bid and took the right of first refusal, which we pay for, from the owner. We use that as part of our contribution. We just finished going out to bid, and we have a tentative award. It's not finalized yet. We're negotiating with the contractor to demolish the motel and do 40 units of affordable housing. We're doing 2 of those major projects on Route 28. We will do no more on 28. We don't want to turn Route 28 into a housing area. Certainly there's a lot of business that needs to be supported in that area. And all of our other units are spread throughout the community in each of the villages. So Mary, do you have some details?
So, hi, I'm Mary. I work full-time for the town of Yarmouth, and I was hired as an administrative assistant to the Director of Community Development. And one day she came in and said, "Oh, I want you to read this affordable housing deed rider and see if you can help sell this home that's up for sale." So on I went to develop a full-time position in affordable housing. And what's really happened in Yarmouth since they created the trust and adopted the Community Preservation Act and allocate 10% of that annual revenue to the trust is that the town's been able to become more flexible and act quicker on their affordable housing program and projects. It really started out as a basic home ownership program on town-owned land in Yarmouth. Now you're talking about scattered site home ownership, still doing home ownership units on town-owned land, but also through the trust and the community preservation program, nonprofits can apply for funds to acquire land for new construction. Additionally, we've been able to expand into affordable rental units and high-quality ones. Again, on town-owned land or through direct applications from private, so you have that private-public partnership. We've also been able to act very quickly if any of our existing affordable units get in trouble. So you probably have some affordable units that were created a while ago. Sometimes those deed riders get outdated. The weaknesses come up when things go for resale or if they're threatened by a foreclosure. This way, the trust has been able to step in and exercise its right of first refusal, grab those units that are expiring, and keep them. Also, some units are not as well kept as other units, so the trust has been able to come in and kind of fix major repairs so that the unit can stay a viable unit. So it's flat, it's fast and flexible having an affordable housing trust. I do recommend that you have somebody from your select board on the trust, and also link that to other major departments or committees in your town. It just seemed to work well. The number of 5 seems to work really well in Yarmouth. I live in Mashpee. They have a trust of 9. Just seems to be a little bit too big. So have to get a meeting day. And we've been able to, as Bob said, put on some serious units onto our inventory. I believe that you're at 5.4% in your subsidized housing inventory out of the 10% goal. We're at 4.5, so we're trying to catch up to you guys. We've brought in 53 units of housing through the trust, and we have 150 planned. So that's significant. And I think it's, because the town thought so carefully about how the trust would, come about, and also how it would be capitalized every year.
Great. Thank you very much. Start with Janelle.
So I just have a question about when you were offering home ownership on the town-owned land, you had a house built. Was it a similar model as the Habitat model in that the housing trust actually maintains ownership of the property or the deed? If the homeowner wanted to sell, it goes back to you?
It does go back to us, but that's with the deed rider. We don't own anything. So everything is
even
contracted.
in between people, you don't own it?
Not unless there's an emergency.
Okay.
So there was one that went to foreclosure. We stepped in and we actually went to the auction and bid on it and owned it for a while. We didn't like doing that. So we actually try to partner with nonprofits to do that. So
Like Habitat
or HAC, or there is Building Dreams Incorporated that does our rental. So, you need to develop that partnership with local nonprofits and regional ones to see who will step in and hold it for you. Once you own a property, all sorts of procurement and requirements on wages kick in. So that's one thing we learned early. If we own it and we want to rehab it, we have to do prevailing wages. If we partner with a nonprofit, they're more flexible. For example, our trust was actually buying buy-down units and selling them. it didn't give us the flexibility to negotiate on the purchase price. So we've changed that to partnering with Housing Assistance Corporation. They're now administrating our buy-down program. They can bargain on sale price. Whereas, as you know, when you procure something, when you're procuring something to acquire something, it's like you have to announce what you'll pay first. So it's hard to negotiate with the seller of a single-family unit on the price when you've already told everybody what you're going to buy it for.
Right. And then you had said for some of the rental units, when you have to go in and make repairs, is it a town repair, or are you working with local contractors, or does the nonprofit take care of actually hiring somebody?
Ideally, it's the nonprofit that's doing that. So they may come to us on an annual basis and say, oh, we'd like to have this type of budget, or we'd like to run this multi-year program. You know, this is our budget. We'll put the money aside in our munis accounting, and we reimburse them for the expenses. But it's not the town themselves going out and doing the repair, because we don't own it.
Okay.
It's a partnership with a nonprofit.
And it's different nonprofits for different properties, it sounds like.
We
Yes.
we
Putting in the bid.
we have 3 or 4, and they all have a different primary mission, right? Or they service a different affordable population, you know. So we've pushed the envelope with some of them, asking them, hey, we need you to do us a favor and hold this property for us. But it seems to be working. So, you know, it's Harwich Ecumenical Council for Housing, you know, housing assistance. We have 2 local Yarmouth-based nonprofits. One is Our First Home, which does the home ownership, and the other one is Building Dreams, that does the rental. Habitat is also a very strong partner, but they're kind of more regional. They're not Yarmouth-based, although they're extremely supportive of our affordable housing in Yarmouth.
Sounds great. Sounds like it would be a great program to model. Thank you.
Don?
Not so much of a question, Mr. Chair, as a comment that I agree with Janelle. I'd like to see us pursue this model.
Thank you, Don. Julie?
Yeah, I agree. I'd love to pursue the model, and I do have some questions. It sounds fascinating what you've been able to accomplish. And in terms of the projects on 28, the density that you were allowed, is that based on the number of units that were in those motels at the time? Was that through a special permit?
We have, so when we started, well, when I started, we were also, the Department of Community Development was also looking at Route 28 and revitalizing Route 28. And one of the initiatives was the motel bylaw, where motels could redevelop as motels, they could repair themselves as motels, improve themselves as motels, or the motel owner could completely, you know, get out of the motel business and do mixed use with housing. And the density that was allowed is 16 units per acre. And so how we got to that is we kind of did a hodgepodge analysis of what was on the ground right now for the motel units. So we didn't want to increase traffic or wastewater flow or, you know, height too much. You know what I mean? We wanted to. So that's where we came with the 16 units per acre. We do have accompanying that a Cape Cod Commission approved growth incentive zone, which is like nitrogen neutral. You know, you have to show that you're keeping the development where it is or undeveloping.
So who helped? Did you have to get assistance with that permitting? I mean, I imagine,
When we wrote the motel bylaw?
Well, not when you wrote the bylaw, but when you go about doing these projects, do you have to get assistance with the permitting, or are you able to just file?
They can just file. It's not a 40B, so as long as they stay within the bylaw,
Okay.
they can do what they wish. We did hire a consultant to help us analyze the bid,
Okay.
because the financials that we require or that are submitted are pretty complicated. So we have a specialist who helps us analyze that, so that when they say they're making 25% profit, they really are.
Yeah.
They're not making 30, 40,
Right.
or whatever. So we needed someone. But other than that, really Mary's done the bulk of the work in doing the bid specifications.
Okay.
And then the trust analyzes that, we interview, and then make a determination.
And so then that whoever wins that bid is doing the permitting work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Great, thank you.
Larry?
Yeah, I certainly like the results. I'm a little, I'm interested in the process. If you can explain that a little more, because it sounds like you get money from CPA, for instance. Now, when that goes into the trust, is that approved at town meeting, or how's that?
Yes.
And when you spend it, can you just walk me through the
Sure.
process of how, how
We
it
have
works?
two ways we receive funding. One is the 10%, which is guaranteed under the CPC. That amounts to about, in our case, 288,000 a year. That pays for some general things, Mary's salary. It pays for some money we set aside.
So that's a general, basically kind of a general
Right.
transfer to you from CPA.
Yes, at town-
CPC votes on that.
And then town
And
meeting
town meeting
votes,
does.
and we explain, if we need to, what the details are of that. Then if we're doing some major projects, such as the Cavalier property or the Yarmouth Gardens, that's a separate article in town meeting with the appropriation from the CPC. And hopefully fully explained at town meeting.
And that goes back, though, in the same process we would use.
Yes, sir. Then it comes into the trust, and then we are required by the CPC to report to them every year, some cases every 6 months, depending on the amount of money. On the Cavalier, they were it was a lot of money. It was $2 million. And so every 6 months, we would go in, here's where we are, here's the bid document, and we do have a member of the CPC on the trust who can take back the direct report.
So people don't see this as being redundant to CPC.
No, because the trust under the general law has certain authority to buy and sell property, to control property, make awards, et cetera. It speeds up the process. That's one of the advantages of the trust.
I like the focus. I
You
just trying to
don't,
see how it goes.
If you had to go to town meeting, then by the end of 3 months, if you're really, really quick in getting a town meeting called together, you might lose the property.
Yeah.
So in this case, the trust can act very quickly. And I think there are enough controls on us. It's not just,
Yeah.
here's some money, go ahead and have a nice day, see you in a year.
And
But that's the process. Town meeting is involved, certainly the accounting office is involved, and all of our meetings are public.
Mary, when you were hired, did they consider farming you out and regionalizing? So maybe you work with 2 towns. If if I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Well, it's somewhat a serious question. I'm not sure we have enough going on to hire a full-time person. Will we work? I
Right.
see Charlie from Brewster. I'm sure they'd be anxious. Of course,
Well,
he's
I did
different, but-
work only part-time for the trust at first,
Okay.
right? So I was an administrative assistant that worked full-time for the Department of Community Development. And I used to be third-time assistant to the director. I also manage the CDBG program for the town. It's Community Development Block Grant, which is funded by HUD. And then a third for affordable housing.
Yeah.
And as the town became more and more interested in being proactive on affordable housing, my job description kind of shifted. So you can do a lot with a part-time person.
So Bob, what's your view? Is that a way to start it, is to try to work with some other, and then we'll see, maybe expands from there, but just to get
It is a good way to start, Larry, I think, because you don't know how deeply you're going to get into it. When we started, we had really no idea that we were going to do 2 major projects on Route 28 with 100 units. And that's a big chunk. So that's taken really since 2007, as we got our feet on the ground, did some small projects, had some success. People in town saw the success, and they were more willing to provide funding through the CPC and support those articles.
To push the envelope, would it work to hire a contractor, a person, to contract that out initially? Would they not be familiar enough with the town?
The trust did
or-
that at first in Yarmouth. The trust did that at first. They had a consultant. And then it switched to in-house. And I think the benefit of having it in-house is that there's somebody with a desk and an office, and your residents can come to that person for some assistance. So just today, 3 people walked into my office in crisis for housing. Now, I didn't offer them a unit, but I got them on the right track to find a unit. So that's a huge benefit to Yarmouth residents, that there's actually a desk in Town Hall that they can go to talk about these things. Yarmouth, I don't know if you have a human service department, Yarmouth does not. So some towns have a human service department, and that's where those people go to. But in Yarmouth, it's my desk. So.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that, you know, what you can see, it's an opportunity to streamline and seem, what makes a lot of sense to me in this program is that the way to do affordable housing is you got to create the subsidy. Either you donate the land, which I think we're in a position to potentially do, or you have CPC as your funding source, which obviously Yarmouth has done that model, and then you have the dollars to actually subsidize projects. And I do think by not being in the landlord business, there's a real value to partnering up with the private sector and let the private sector nonprofits do the work, get the deed riders and those other legal elements to guarantee that the properties stay, you know, as affordable. I think this model just makes so much sense to move forward. And as I said publicly before, you know, I think having the town administrator make that commitment and be on that, you know, obviously we have access to the attorneys, we have access to resources that maybe an average committee wouldn't have. So I had volunteered before, and I would continue to volunteer to go on that to make sure we get it started and to see if we can duplicate some of the success. At least from my position, you know, I've been here for 3.5 years, and with the exception of Habitat, there really hasn't been too much in Hetch, too much in terms of progress. So I think that this is a model that would maybe jumpstart us and get us going. And my retired colleague in the back there, Mr. Sumner, you know, you see a lot of folks that are interested in this, and we can establish those partnerships. And if we need to, you know, if Harwich doesn't have enough cash and Brewster doesn't have enough cash, then maybe we join up to do a regional effort. So, you know, I think that this board has been very open to that, obviously, with the work we've done with Chatham, and let's continue to broaden that and see if we can do something on the housing front.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Julie?
Thank you.
Can I ask you one other question? In terms of when you went forward to create the trust and change the bylaw and all that, what was the time frame on that? How long roughly did it take you?
The trust itself took just the 1 year
Okay.
to create that, because the Board of Selectmen were really enthusiastic. The board felt strongly that affordable housing was a crisis in Yarmouth and really wanted to be very active. In fact, one of the 4 members of the Board of Selectmen is here tonight, who was one of the leaders in making that happen, Kurt Sears.
Okay.
And so that, with that kind of support, we were able to move quickly. I think on the bylaw, that was a much longer process.
Yeah.
Right, the bylaw was, I started 2004, the bylaw was passed, end of 2004, the bylaw was passed in 2006.
Okay.
And it was a huge effort with the chamber, motel owners, the state, the Cape Cod Commission. So actually, it did fairly well, and it hasn't, knock on wood, there hasn't been a need to really tweak it. It's doing okay. What happened was that we didn't see a lot of initiative. Right away, we got the Hampton Inn, and then just kind of flatlined. And we said, well, what if we put a little bit of money out there to see what happened, and boom, two more properties are going to get converted into high-quality units, raise and replace. So John Simpkins was a reuse of our old high school.
Okay.
And that was important. It was important to have a good, solid, affordable housing program to get that going. But I think that if you take this on, I think in a year you're going to have all the components ready to go, and probably in about 3 fiscal years you're going to really start to see the results.
Okay.
As you know, if anybody's here in construction, affordable housing or market rate, it takes a while because you have to find the spot, it's the site, you have to engineer it, plan it. and build it. So it does take a little time to get the person in the unit, but as you can see, we might have over 100 units coming online in the next 3 fiscal years, so we're
great.
excited.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Chris, what do you need from us to pursue this? I think the
I
consensus
think we have
was-
the bylaw, which we borrowed from the Yarmouth model, and I think really that's the key piece, and then we'll put together a presentation, which I think you guys had shared a presentation with me before, so we'll do a Harwich version of that to present to town meeting, outline what the concept is, and then we will prepare a application for CPC for this cycle. So if we want to hit the ground running, you need money to do that. So we'll have an application to CPC. And I think there is money that in that 10% allocation over the last 3 years. So we should be able to ask for enough starter money to make a difference.
Yeah, as well as a housing coordinator for this year.
Yeah, we will actively research the housing coordinator and see if we can get that in as well.
Great. Thank you
Well,
very much.
Let us
Thank you.
know if you need any help, okay?
We will be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, categorized tax title list. We talked about this roughly a month ago. In your packet is a categorized tax title list. Chris, will you just kind of give us an overview of where this sits? I know you've had meetings with Amy and...
Yeah, I have kind of taken on, this has taken a little bit of a different turn, Mr. Chairman, than I had anticipated. We've had some folks that have approached Amy and myself about looking at properties, and they have some claims of ownership. And I think if there are folks that are out there that have claims of ownership, as I've been indicating to people, ultimately what we're looking to do is to establish the appropriate owner, identify the appropriate owner, and have the taxes paid on these properties. So at least from my perspective, I think one of the first goals is to try to identify those parcels where the ownership is kind of a potentially known, and to remedy those. So I think that we're trying to refine the list down, and there will be some properties that probably it's not in the town's interest to own, that we may want to come back with that refined list to send out to the marketplace. And we have not had a chance. I have to be perfectly honest that taking my time away to be the Council on Aging Director has really put a pretty good dent in my ability to pursue some of these things. But we did have one meeting. I had another person meet with me today that wanted to set up about the ownership. So one of the things I think that's important is we need to make sure we get it right when we go out. And I think that was kind of one of the board's concerns. Let's make sure we have it right. So I think from discussions you and I have had, Mr. Chair, I think that there are some properties that we may want to consider going into tax title for purposes of identifying those lots for housing. If there's a house that's on the property that's been abandoned or in rough shape, that we can then acquire and then replace that property. So I think there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done to identify which category we want to put those properties in, and what do we want to attempt to pursue, and which road we want to get on. So I guess I would ask the board for additional time to be able to try to put that together. Obviously, this problem didn't occur overnight, so it's not going to be resolved overnight. It's going to take some time. But we will focus on trying to come back, and I will identify some of those properties. Just one example, a fairly substantial example, but the Judah Eldridge property that we have identified, that will be a application request to CPC to acquire that for conservation purposes. Out of that $5 million in back taxes that are owed to the town, that's probably close to $500,000. So that's 10% by itself. So when I say what approach do we want to take, I think that is one that we potentially take by eminent domain and pursue by eminent domain for conservation purposes. And we'll look at some of those other pieces, the bigger pieces, to see how we can approach some of taking a dent out of those.
Chris, would it make sense to have other companies, our current tax council and maybe a couple others come in and give us a proposal on taking care of this in-house rather than, I appreciate what you just said and what we're working on, but you know, eventually on some of these properties we are going to have to foreclose, and from the little bit of homework I've done, it seems that it's of great benefit to the town to do it themselves. And in some of these cases, the properties are vacant or burnt or Does it make sense to get proposals on having council, even our own council, do this as an in-house?
I think it does in a lot of ways, specifically the tax title piece. I would say one thing that I did work on in my last community, which I thought was pretty good, was the Attorney General's office. If you can identify properties that are delinquent, will come in and for free will help us to negotiate those properties and see if they can get those into a better state. I don't think it's my last place. That was a problem that was very prevalent in the community. Certainly not as prevalent here. But yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, maybe I could look at getting some tax title people and see if we could start doing it. I don't necessarily think we have to go through a law firm. I think we can approach directly some of these tax title examiners to kind of go through some of these properties and see where they are in terms of the title issue.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we do that, I'd like to, through you, Mr. Chair, caution us that if anybody here believes that all of those properties were actually going to wind up being given an opportunity to pay up and then they walk off into the sunset with their houses back, I doubt that. There's a certain part of this industry that's based on taking title to the house and flipping it, which is where the real money is. So that's why legal counsel would be an important aspect of this thing, because we're really looking to get either made whole or take possession of the property on behalf of the town as opposed to a private entity.
I understood.
Thank you. Janelle?
I have nothing.
Julie?
No, I would agree. I think that we need to continue to look at this closer, and if there's any way we can get help that, without costing us a fortune, that'd be great.
Larry?
Yeah, I think as before, I'm anxious that we move ahead with this. Because people aren't paying taxes, we're paying taxes for them, basically, which is not a fair way to go. And I know I did get one note, some people have been already, I guess, helping us out and trying to identify. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but we need to take all that into consideration.
Yeah, I would say the one meeting I had actually last week that, I am concerned about that there may be valid claims of ownership over property that our tax records are not in line with the land court records. And, I wouldn't want to pursue something where we make a claim that we may be at fault in the way we did some of the taxes. So
reason maybe you get some help then, huh?
Yeah, I think it would be good to do that. And quite honestly, this is not, in my mind, a adversarial relationship. If anything, having some of these discussions with people, it's simply the ownership is in question. How do we clean up that question, and how do we get people to pay their taxes in a timely fashion? So I think that when we did this initially, we had, I think it was 30 people, at least 30 people that came forward to do the payment plans. So there is definitely those predatory practices of these companies. I don't dispute that at all. But for us, I mean, part of operating government and fiduciary is to make sure people pay their taxes. So it's that piece that we're focused on. But at least from what I've seen, and I think the treasurer has seen, people want to clean this up, and they want to be able to develop their property or do what they want with their property. So this is not adversarial, and I would applaud people or encourage people just to come forward and let's work on it together and clean it up. If they have their tax title people do it, then that saves the town from having to engage in that practice too.
Thank you, Chris. Donald?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the point that Chris made, I think it's really important, especially given the discussion I had this past week with one of the individuals who was basically confused about where we're at. Since I made the motion for this, we only asked to delay what we had done until June 30th of 2018. Right. We're still on the clock, and we're still looking to pursue this. It wasn't like we walked away from the tax lien situation, and I can assure the public we're going, one way or the other, we're going to go after this.
Thank you. Next up, Planning Board appointments and terms. 2 weeks ago, we heard this, and we had Larry Brophy, the chairman of the Planning Board, was going to meet with Don Howell and straighten it out. Things didn't go exactly like we had talked about, and fact is, we appointed too many people to appointed an extra person to an 8-member board. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Don to share his work, and then entertain a motion to correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have the memo that was in the packet. I'm not sure how much more you want me to delve.
Just an overview.
The overview of it is exactly that. Regardless of the number of people at the current moment who are serving, and if everybody were to leave, except for the 2 individuals who were appointed June 27th of 2016, the board exceeded its authority under the charter and under the bylaws to be able to make those appointments on several levels, if you read the package. One of them is a pervasive problem that we've had that was identified, and I think Mr. Ballantyne was here when I came 3 years ago and identified that the staggered terms were really off kilter on the planning board. So that got memorialized with these appointments. In addition, they made an appointment to an even number board, which isn't permitted by the charter, and to a number 8, which exceeded the bylaws maximum of 7. One of the 2 individuals really wasn't appointed because one of the 2 individuals received an appointment for something that didn't exist. So the question is, at this point, regardless of what we do going forward with the planning board, some action has to be taken because we're putting the town at risk for having an oversubscribed planning board listening to anything that could be challenged in court going forward. So you've got Larry Brophy and Linda Sabula. Larry is operating as a chair right now. The bottom line is one or the other of them, you have to wind up revoking or rescinding the appointment, and then we can move forward with whatever we do if there is a vacancy in the future. But you have to recognize that one of those 2 wasn't valid because there was no authority to do it.
Right. And Larry was a alternate prior to.
Larry was elevated as an alternate, and Linda was actually appointed just straight out from the general public subsequent to an interview.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
I'm just trying to be sure that I agree with the remedy. Thank you for the work, Don. Last time we talked about the issue and that one of the board members, Tom Stella, was going to resign and that would open a vacancy. I guess he did resign today, effective today, so there is a vacancy at the board at the moment.
He has not resigned.
He didn't send a letter in and
There's no signature.
explain that to me.
Irrelevant at this point because the letter came to the Board of Selectmen, not the town clerk. It wasn't signed. It came from the chairman of the planning board. And tonight before us, we have, as agreed 2 weeks ago, to fix an over-membership. What we do from that point on, tomorrow on, is another agenda item. Tonight, what we're to do is fix the current problem. So we do not have a resignation. We have a letter floating around that was sent as an attachment, made out to the wrong people. And Don Howell had a conversation last week or 2 weeks ago after our meeting with Tom Stello.
Right.
And at that time, he indicated to Don that he had no interest in resigning whatsoever. So right now, it doesn't exist.
Okay, that's different than my information.
Don?
Just one quick tag to that. It's a slippery slope if we get to the point where a chair of any committee could actually call up a member who was duly appointed and asked to resign, to make room. I mean, and there was a phone call made. Mr. Stello did make an appointment for the clerk's office last week to be sworn in this week, and when this thing hit the packet, all of a sudden there was something that came through. Doesn't have a signature, didn't come from him, didn't go to the right place, and we're not agended to make a swap in any event. We don't have anybody on notice that we're making an appointment, nor have we interviewed anybody. You have to remedy the fact that one of the 2 of these individuals, through no fault of their own, is occupying a position that doesn't exist.
Larry, you care to add anything? You hear everything you need to hear?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I did talk to Tom Stello. I certainly didn't ask him to resign. I asked him to become an alternate member, and he agreed. I know he sent a letter. Whether the letter is valid or invalid, that's not up to me to determine. And I mean, I'm just looking at this. The only thing that I can read from this is it's just a complete vote of no confidence in what we're doing. I mean, I'm looking to have a planning board that works, and that's the only thing that I'm looking for. Looks like we came up with a solution, but that might not be the solution you want, so be it. I mean, I can't add anything to it. It appears right now that there's 7 members and 1 alternate of the planning board. I mean, I don't determine who resigns and who doesn't. I got a copy of the email from Tom, and I don't know how you resign from the position. I know now, from what I've just been told, but if you're going to switch members around and take people off and put people on, then so be it. There's really not too much I can do about that.
Thank you. Janelle?
I've been part of the interview committee for 2 years now, so I apologize for being part of the problem last year. Dawn, thanks for coming on board and really doing research. And just so everybody knows, this is not the only committee or board that Dawn is researching. There are problems with other ones as well. We're just starting at the top and working our way down. So to undo the problem, I do believe that Dawn has outlined what we need to do. We need to remove Linda or Larry. They were both appointed the same day, unfortunately. But Larry was an alternate member previous to that interview. So Linda would have to be that person. And as far as a full member wanting to become a alternate, I do not believe that the chair can ask for a member to become an alternate. I think that's inappropriate. In order for a full member to become an alternate, I do think that that member must approach the interview committee or the board, and that's it, not the chairman of their committee. Am I right on that one? Does that seem like the right process? Is everybody in agreement with that one?
Yes.
So at this point, I would like to make a motion that we rescind the appointment of Linda Sabula to the planning board effective immediately.
And change the term for Mr. Brophy to 2018?
I'm just going to do one motion right now.
Sure.
Any second on that?
Well, can I comment on, I mean, so ultimately,
I'll second it for this so that we can get into discussion.
so were we, but, I mean, we didn't all go around to talk about it, so.
No, we'll go to discussion. We'll do it under
All right,
discussion. So
okay.
I'll second it for discussion. Julie?
So it seems to me that that's the logical way to approach it based on Dawn's work, and thank you, Dawn, you've done a ton of work on this. It does seem like it's the logical way, and it does appear that, I guess my only question to Janelle's point is, if that's the proper way to ask to be an alternate, do we know that nobody wants to be an alternate, other than what we already know from what's been discussed?
My sense of it is, we're rescinding an appointment we shouldn't have made. Tomorrow, we can start
Go
the process
forward.
of fixing it.
I get you, yeah.
So at the end of the day, we appointed 8 people to a 7-member board.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So this is a corrective action. Tomorrow, we can take suggestions from Mr.
Okay.
Brophy as far as what he wants on his committee. But until Mr. Stello resigns,
Right.
with the town clerk who he's supposed to resign with, he's still a member of the planning board.
Right. So we still have
Whatever
to-
conversations have happened with them or anyone else is completely irrelevant until we get something signed by the clerk that says he's resigned. Don?
And just to remind you, we don't have a 7-member board with the math with this, because regardless of who resigned, one of the 2 appointees that we're discussing wasn't appointed. So if that's the case, if he did really resign, and I don't know that, because I haven't seen anything with a signature, and it certainly didn't go to the clerk. But if that's the case, They've got 6 members currently.
Any other discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All set? Larry, how'd you vote?
I'll go along with it.
Okay.
As long as we,
Unanimous?
Unanimous,
we,
yeah.
we follow through, as you say, Mike, with the action as soon as we can.
The action will come from the request. It has to come from the planning board, otherwise we post a vacancy when there's a vacancy. Don?
And Mr. Chair, we need another motion also because the board exceeded its authority to unbalance the staggered terms. So I would motion that we amend the appointment that was made last year to Mr. Brophy for a term to expire in June 30th of 2018.
I'll second that.
That creates a board of 223.
Okay.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to the town administrator's contract. As mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. No.
I was just going to say I accept the decision, and I'll be putting in my application for either the vacancy that is going to exist or for the alternate vacancy. I will be doing that.
Thank you. Town administrator's contract, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we discussed this in executive session, where we built the framework to make an offer to Chris based on his request for a 2-year extension. So that proposal will be made to Chris this week. West Harwich School discussion. I put this on, as I have put this on in the past, to continue conversation about it so that we are not talking about this again 15 years from now. And Janelle had, I believe, either an idea or someone approach you, so I'm going to let Janelle, actually, Chris, I think I'll start with you. Have we gotten anything further from Ally on a new RFI or direction, I should
Yeah,
say?
no, Mr. Chairman, I do have, we had a staff meeting in which we floated some different concepts. I've been negligent about putting together those concepts. I think we probably generated about 5 to 7 different elements. I will put those together and bring those to the board. One of the ones that I thought had probably more traction than others was a discussion in which the building would be repurposed to being a bathroom facility, have a playground be located in that area, and to continue to provide for a space for any kind of sewer operations that we would need to provide to the 3-town agreement, that we're pursuing a three-town agreement with Dennis and Yarmouth. That location is I believe, a vital location in that, so any plan or recommendation, at least that I would make, would have to include some component of how do we facilitate the wastewater throughout. And when I say that, it's not going to be a full-scale treatment plant or anything of that nature. It would just be simply most likely a pump house type of operation and a potential recharge area, although I think there's less potential of that. But I think that one of the things that we had was to try to retain the building, use it as a restroom facility, and to have a recreation purpose down there. I think the recreation purpose does make some sense with the proximity to the church and other activities. But those are really, that was one idea that came out of the discussion. I do have my notes. I'll formalize those notes and try to have those for the August 7th meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you, Chris. Janelle?
So we had a discussion on June 19th about, it was under our minutes as the old rec building, and we talked about the Cape Cod Theater Company. So my daughter recently was in a production there, and so I got to know some of the interns, and I was speaking with them about the Arts Center is what they call it here. The old rec building is what we used to call it. So one of the things that is of concern for the theater people, for the participants of their programming, is the distance between their actual theater in West Harwich and this one here in Harwich Center. And especially in the summertime when they offer programs for children, sometimes there will be a program for a younger child, let's say at the art center, and an older child at the regular theater, but at the same time. So a parent is trying to manipulate through traffic on Route 28, and so a couple of the interns at the cast party were saying, you know, really be better if it was closer. So red light or whatever, white light, whatever color light went off in my head, I said West Harwich School. So I just wanted to bring that to the board for a possible discussion. We know it's structurally sound, and it certainly would need some renovations inside, but you never know. I mean, with enough volunteers, it's 2 floors, and literally within walking distance of the actual Harwich Junior Theater, Cape Cod Theater Company. So I think it would be a safe alternative for families, knowing that maybe some of their children would be there for multiple hours, or maybe they were at the, let's call it the West Harwich Theater, the school theater, and they could walk via Belmont Road over to the regular theater for whatever they needed to do. So just wanted to open that discussion up, also because the old rec building is in such disrepair, and we had discussed that the Cape Cod Theater Company had gone through some financially tough times and was not paying their way, so to speak.
Thank you. Don?
A younger, slimmer version of me actually was involved with this in the late 90s, and that was one of the, I was on the vice chair of the West Harwich School Building Committee then, and that was one of the possibilities we did explore. If the theater were to pursue that, because I'm not related to the organization right now, we could use the South Harwich Meeting House license agreement kind of model if we were looking to do something, because it kind of enabled people to go out, raise money, and then love the building and do stuff. That the Sisson Road building is in disrepair right now. No one should forget, though, that the then HJT did sink a considerable amount of money into it at the time. Changed where the kitchen was, the toilets were, I mean, and that was on their dime. So if I'd be supportive if, because something has to be done to, for the building, because oftentimes you save a building but you don't have a purpose for it. So there's a real problem with that. This building really deserves to be saved. So to find something that's durable that allows us to keep that building in place and operating would be a good thing.
Chris, can we get a letter to the board, the HJT board, and see if they're interested in leasing or interested in having the conversation anyway?
Cape Cod Theater Company.
Julie?
Yeah, I would be in favor of it. I think it's a good idea, and it makes sense proximity-wise, and maybe that frees up the other building for us to look at other opportunities, so.
Larry?
Yeah, no real comment. We have expended, I think, Chris, a fair amount of money trying to at least fix up the old high school.
Yeah,
I know some years ago, before the theater group took it over, we committed to do at least some repairs to bring it up on the first floor. I think the second floor we lost revenue, funds to do so, but there was money expended on that.
Yeah, I did do a tour of the buildings, and just to be clear, I believe in that one, a new foundation was put in, at least a section of the basement. And then I know since my time, that was done before my time, but we did do some windows, what do you call it, storm windows were put on. So I think the foundation work was extensive. Is the building fully operational? I mean, the bathrooms, it still needs work. I mean, that part I think is without dispute. But we did pump in some CPC money to fix the foundation, I know for certain.
Thank you. Anyone in the public? I did receive a letter, I think, forwarded to me that Duncan was the author on, asking for a seat at the table. Was it any comments or nothing? All set? Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right, moving on. HMEA contract, as also mentioned, executive session tonight. We did approve the HMEA contract. So moving on to 4 Central Ave discussion. This was the other executive session topic, and we voted to reject the bids on 4 Central Ave and to go back out to bid. Chris, do you want to elaborate at all on that?
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Chairman, just for folks that may be watching too, on the HMEA contract, that is consistent with other contracts that we have, that the board has approved at 3% for 3 years, so that is a consistent one. They may be the first one in that third year that has 2%, just that, I don't think I mentioned that earlier, but I think that's the first one we have settled for the third year out. So there's only one contract that remains under negotiation. Under the 4 Central Ave discussion, certainly under the procurement law, there is an expectation that a organization is supposed to do something that's in its best interest. The town did put out, or through administration, we put out a bid offering to direct abutters. This property is so small that you really can't construct any kind of dwelling on it. It's really parking places, for lack of a better use. And there have been some homeowners that had expressed, direct abutters, that had expressed some interest in it. I think that we have received kind of competing bids after the fact. And certainly, I think it's a clear indication by the town that we can probably get additional revenue if we were to go out again as part of the process. We did receive a bid after the fact, and under the procurement law that we cannot seriously consider that, but I do think that it's in the town's best interest to get the value of that property. It's a kind of I guess, an important piece to those neighbors, and we have an opportunity to realize some additional revenue. And it's our obligation, or my obligation as Chief Procurement Officer, to make sure that we recommend that we get to maximize that revenue opportunity.
Thank you, Chris. All right, on to the library project update. Chris, I'll let you start with this one, too.
Thank you. On the library project, I think is important. I know that in some of my discussions, this is not a painting project. This is really a preservation project. So peeling off or taking off, stripping the paint off, and then improving and making improvements to the subsurface is really what's entailed in this. The town did go out. I think we did receive, I think 4 or 5 bids. The first time that we went out, it was a all or nothing bid, which isn't the best, and those bids came in above the town appropriated amount to do that work. So therefore, that bid was not pursued. There was a discussion with the library trustees and the architect. The recommendation of the architect was to go back out and split the project up, do a section of the building, the front section that faces Main Street, and then do the back and the side as add alternates. That was sent out. The hope was, because it is a preservation project and you're exposing wood and having to put the primer on and the paint is sensitive to weather conditions, so it's not work you can do in the late fall or during the winter or even early spring. So when we went back out, even though we had divvied up the project, it actually came in higher. So we could do the front, but we wouldn't be able to do anything else. So the recommendation of Mr. Libby and the recommendation of the architect is that we should go out, and I think we did put the recommendation of the architect in the packet, to go out in the fall of 17 and line that work up. I think there is a significance to that under the bidding environment. If you have people that already have their work lined up for the summer, and you're asking them to bump other work to do this, you're going to pay a premium, and I think that's what we saw in the bid results. If we go out in the fall and line that work up for the beginning of late spring next year, that will be the first work people will contract. So we won't hopefully be paying as much of a premium, and we'll get more bidders. So I do concur with the recommendation of Mr. Libby as well as the architect. And this may be another candidate for either, and I had a meeting today with the library director, looking at potentially obtaining some grants to help us supplement some of that, or at least an additional request to CPC for funding, so that way we can attempt to complete the project in total. We do have 2 complete sets of bids that we've received, so we know that the bid estimate that we had is low, so additional funds would be required. So that's kind of where we are in terms of the library project, Mr. Chairman.
Chris, at what point do we decide that this isn't really what the voters voted for and go back? I mean, you know, these estimates are extremely high, and I recognize that it's not just a paint project. But, you know, reading through the specs of the project, I think the bulk of it is paint. But the architects seem to have designed this where the way it's being done doesn't allow for a lot of people to bid on it. I did go through the website for DCAM today.
Yes.
And the DCAM certification, to me, reads something, how can we charge towns more money? I think it's I'm not sure we're going to get the bidders for this. I'm not sure that the bidders aren't going to stay at that very high number. So looking back to Peter Hughes's comments about the church in Chatham, which was done with CPA funds also, local contractors, I think Rick Roy Construction actually bid that project, and I did call him ahead of this meeting to ask if he was DCAM certified and why he hasn't bid on our project, and part of it was that certification, and part of it was the difference between how our specs are laid out and that chemical stripping process versus bead blasting, for instance, which on their project in Chatham, they had lead certified people there for the entire time. So do we relook at this, or do we just continue to go back out to bid for it and then have yearly escalating prices because time is passing?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, you know, certainly I can have a discussion with Mr. Libby and see, you know, take into account some of your topics. I have asked him to call some of the bidders too, to kind of corroborate that information and see. Certainly, the one thing I think is important, that the building does deteriorate, and if we don't do anything, that's not good. So to the taxpayer question, I think that the taxpayers in town meeting did appropriate a certain amount of money, and at least now it doesn't appear to be a accurate amount of money. And going back is obviously less than desirable, but still I think it's important to do the right thing. I think if we can find those elements, you know, one of the things, Mr. Chairman, it took a long time to get this out to bid, and we missed our window of getting it out last fall. And by missing that window, we've kind of restricted ourselves to the bid environment. So I think it's important to try to get the timing right to get out and line that up where we're the first work. To your point, and I think it's a very valid point, let's look and see, are there things that we can do, have equivalents such as the mechanical stripping as opposed to the chemical stripping that may make this more affordable and open it up.
Well, and I want to make it clear that I support this project 100%. The building is disgraceful from the street at this point. It's peeling. It's not looking the way we want it to look for where it is. So I do support this, but at some point we have to move forward, and it's, you know, we're approaching talking about this as much as the CVAC funds, Chris. So I appreciate the work you've done on it. The other question I have on this project, though, is the columns. Why do we still have 4x4s out front? I believe the columns was a separate project, separate piece of this. Can we do something about the columns out there since they're not structural? Can we get that part of it started?
Believe it or not, Mr. Chairman, that was always part of the project. The issue was, I think I went over there with, I don't know if it was Mr. Libby or one of the DPW guys, and you could push that column over and you could have it land on a kid. So we shored them up really for public safety purposes.
So that's my question. Can we do anything about the columns now, or do we have to wait for the paint prices and that piece of it? Can we?
I mean, that may be something to look at. Can we break up some of the project elements and do that separately? So that's something we can certainly have a discussion about.
Thank you. Questions from the board, Larry?
No.
Julie?
No, I think it needs to be fixed. I don't know if we have to go back or, you know, I think, what about in terms of the chemical stripping versus the other, I think we also have to be careful and look at, because it is a historic building, we have to look at the specific parameters of what they require And if it means that we have to stick with what we have, then we need to figure out how to fund it properly,
Well,
'cause-
my point to that, just as Chatham did it with their church, and it was CPA funds, so it should be, and that's historic preservation as well.
Yeah,
And
I
they
know.
did, they bead blasted it. So,
Well, I guess I think we have to look at what listing it's on.
Janelle, questions?
I missed the first part of it, but I think I got the gist. No, I don't have any questions. I think it's what you say is smart.
Don?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm inclined to agree with the chair, I mean, to at least look at this relative to what other people are doing. I mean, we've done work on Brooks Academy, too, about 10, 15 years ago, but not with these criteria assigned to it. So I don't think it would hurt anything to revisit the underlying assumptions and see other people and how they've done what they've done, and see if we're involved with overkill or if it's just exactly what we should be doing.
Be nice to get it done. Okay, moving on to new business, potential community preservation committee articles. Thank you, Chris, for putting that list together. You want to do an overview on this?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, just put a plug in so people have a sense. Some of these things are items that did not get funded in previous years that I believe are still critically important. The first one, and these are ones that administration or staff throughout the organization will be working to put together. Hinckley's Pond will be resubmitted again. This will be a third time. The Natural Resources Director and myself have been initiated behind that. That is something that is part of our CWMP and something that is, believe it or not, part of Phase 1. So we're already into Phase 2, and we have not completed it from Phase 1. So it is something that still needs to be completed. And that's basically two things. One, alum treatment that would be done to the pond to encapsulate the nitrogen or the phosphorus that's in the pond. And the second, which was done at the request of the CPC, was to expand that project and get better access. This past weekend, or not this weekend, the weekend before, I happened to be over in the town of Orleans, and they have a bike parking area right by their downtown on their rail trail system. And they have a place for people to congregate with bikes, and that's exactly what we were looking to do. The folks that have the country store across the street on 124 have numerous signs saying that they don't want bikes. I think they don't want to commingle bikes with cars, which makes a lot of sense. So doing a bike type rack and maybe some kind of cover and a stairway down to Hinckley's Pond should go well on the way to trying to improve the access. Again, acknowledging that the town has limited areas on that pond that we own to get access to that. I've been twice, so that's why I'm a little bit more passionate about that than others. But
Thanks, Chris. I mean, I grew up on that pond, and thousands of bikes go by that. I mean, if they to say that pond isn't used, I really didn't get the argument on that. So I agree with you, and I think hopefully under new leadership with CPC this year, we get recognized at least for that project.
I appreciate the comments, Mr. Chairman. We do have a retention system working with the town clerk. She's putting in a application again. This was, again, not voted last year, to digitize town records. This is designed to kind of preserve historical records. We have King Systems, which is a firm that's been around a long time that specializes in preservation of public records to do that, so we will put that in. Once we get the records kind of culled out and digitized or microfilmed, we do need to have a place to store them. And the community center director, Carolyn, I think has done an outstanding job of kind of laying out in the basement of the community center that there is provision that we can have an area of that basement to be able to store the records. So I think that makes sense. On Albro House, I have received some of that material from folks about the estimate to look at that building. So I will look and we'll hopefully revise that number down from the $12,000 from the original estimate about looking at the status of Albro and maybe considering other potential uses of it. Judah Eldridge, as I alluded to earlier, in the Hawks Nest area, that is something that the town looked at initially as a wastewater recharge site. But due to zoning considerations and the neighbors had put forth effort to have the town acknowledge that as conservation land. So to acquire for conservation purposes is something that we would look at. The town planner and conservation agent would lead that, hopefully lead that charge. The housing trust, as discussed tonight, would probably be most likely myself and the town planner. The West Harwich School, some of the concepts, we will have to formalize some concepts to at least put forward to the CPC folks, whether we use it as an agriculture museum, a recreation area, or a farmer's market, or a combination, or a extension to the theater group. Brooks Park, Phase 5, focus on LED lighting. This is one that a resident came forward about a year and a half ago about saying that Brooks Park is fairly dark at night, and how do we get people from concerts and other areas back to their cars more safely. So Brooks Park Phase 5 is being contemplated. New scoreboard at White House Field, also a recreation initiative. Brooks Library has some preservation work that they'd like to consider. Cemetery Commission is looking at projects to do, and then to look at with real estate and open space. They are, I guess, trying to determine which properties that they would like to pursue as well relative to their charge.
Chris, can we assist the housing committee in getting an article together similar to what Chatham does? Getting some of the money out of the housing bucket and putting it into the committee? I know that we're talking about the trust, but if that passes this year, it'll be a year later that we get any money. And it seems that we as a town haven't spent any money on housing in 3 years out of our CPA funds.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, my concept or my thought process would be to ask for that 10%, which I believe hasn't been expended for 3 years, and as part of that allocation, say that we would use some to fund part-time staff.
So take the whole amount out.
So, yeah, we
trust.
would, I mean, if there's, estimated 500,000 in there, I don't see why we couldn't do, 475 and then do 25,000 to get us started in the business of trying to hire somebody.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have control this year if we can, of some of that money to do some projects.
Yeah, I
rather
was thinking of doing the application at the same time we form it. Why form it if we're not gonna
Right, thank you.
build something?
Yep, thank you. Okay, thank you for the overview. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All commendable stuff. The only thing that I would at least mention in public session here is I went to several of these meetings last year. I've spent the last couple of weeks moving on to the next committees, reviewing stuff. I can't find anywhere where there's a criteria for how you do, I mean, there's a form online, but people were turned down last year because they were told, well, you didn't go to the Historic District Committee. There's nothing written about that. Before this gets out of hand, for the next round, I suggest we as a board, I'm on the liaison, but I'm not doing anything on my own without the board being aware that I can't find any criteria that for you to do this, you have to get a sponsor from this committee or that committee, and that was the basis upon a number of denials. It would really be nice, before we start this again, whatever priority we put this in, to be able to know for a fact that it's transparent. Here's the form, here's how you do it, and here's how we expect you to migrate to the point where you get your application to be considered.
Yeah, thank you, and that's a good point. I think, do we want to bring them in as a board and have a joint meeting, or would we all allow Don to represent us and go through the facts and...
Well, Mr. Chairman, to that point, I know I was asked, and someone did provide to me the information, but in our bylaws for the establishment of the CPC committee, I think it's important that there is in here that after the above-named commissions, which they've referenced the commissions that should be put on, that they are designated member, that the Board of Selectmen shall confirm their appointment as members of the Community Preservation Committee. Membership of the Community Preservation Committee of those members designated by any of the above-named town agencies is contingent upon the members' continued service on the designated board. I think it may be worthwhile for, whether it's the interview committee or this board, to come out and say that, if the bylaw says that it's the Board of Selectmen that can pick, the people or confirm the people that go on, that you should probably lay out the expectation that a lot of projects were canceled last year. And it wasn't just for, quite honestly, it wasn't just for not getting the right information. In some cases, I'll say on Hinckley's Pond as an example, we asked, well, what do you need? And there was nothing. It was just dead silence. And, it's been a long time I've been in government, and I don't think I've ever seen that. And I think that if you're going to lay out a criteria or say that you need a criteria, then lay out the criteria. And I think, quite honestly, too, and maybe this is where the board, as people go on, if there's a designee that's on there for historic, then they should be the person that helps people fill the historic application, or open space, help people. I don't know why we're not helping applicants get things approved.
Agreed.
I mean, just fundamentally, it just needs to be updated this year.
So
And the
does the-
board has an opportunity to do that.
So does the board want to start with the liaison and then have a joint meeting if we need to? Do we want Don to, Larry?
Yes, I'm surprised, actually, having served on CPC granted some years ago now, that it's become so rigid. It was a much more of a give and take. At least I was on the board where it may not have been outlined as what we're expecting now, but there were several meetings. And the first one was identifying gaps, and then they came back. And so it was I think it worked out because it wasn't as rigid. And maybe this will give us a step going that way. But you still need to impress upon people we need a dialogue to learn and gain support, because they're always asking for CPC never wants to fund 100% of our projects. They're always asking for some financial support, whether it's time or money. So there's more than, we need to set the tone as well.
Well, and to that, I mean, Hinckley's Pond, we almost asked the taxpayers in a debt exclusion this year to fund
Yeah.
Hinckley's Pond, and the money's sitting in the fund.
Yeah.
And they didn't expend any of that.
Yeah.
So, Julie, you're all right with
Yeah, I'm
Don
good.
starting the legwork on this, Janelle? Don, you all right with Don starting?
bucks.
Thank you. And we'll look forward to you coming back with that.
Sure.
Chris, anything else on that?
Nope, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Update on wastewater project status. Chris, this was just kind of an overview so people know who's hanging around in their yards and where we are on phase 2 design.
Yeah, if I could do B and C together, wastewater project status and phase 2, they're both interconnected in my mind. I may defer to Larry. Attended a meeting last Friday, so I'll defer to Larry on the effort with Harwich, Dennis, and Yarmouth. In terms of some other elements, we do have, as I alluded to earlier, in which we have survey crews that are out. These are folks that are taking measurements, and they are taking elevations to design out the system. That is a necessary part for the design of the East Harwich system. We also have, I attended a meeting with some of the engineers to talk about a joint application with Chatham. One of the things that did come out, I guess the State Revolving Loan Fund people wanted to see 2 applications. So Chatham will do an application for their phasing of their project and that interconnect that we have agreed to partner with them. So that would be an application that we will partner with Chatham on. I do have the cost to do that is $7,900, which half of it would be our obligation to pay, which is fairly small dollars to put that application together. Because that is a IMA, intermunicipal agreement, it's not a contract. Anything under $50,000, I have the authority to sign, but an intermunicipal agreement should be signed by the Board of Selectmen. So I will have that. I got that a little bit after the agenda was set to put in there for that joint application. And then we would do our own application for the construction side on the design and construction on the East Harwich model. So that was something based upon the comments. And as I was concerned that, it is a regional effort, so do we get credit for being a regional effort? And they said, yes, we would, because it is still a partnership between Harwich and Chatham. but they wanted the financing. We have to pay our bills, Chatham has to pay theirs, so they wanted to keep the financing clean. So that part is underway. That joint application, I believe, has to be in the middle of August, so that is well underway to be completed on that interconnect. On so we have the survey work. I did talk a little bit to CDM in regards to the survey work and when we could anticipate getting a more detailed estimate of the cost. That's something, obviously, I think that's going to be an important number. Most likely, I'll have to carry the construction costs that we already have in the capital budget. They anticipate probably January or even into February before we get better numbers. So the good news is that should be before town meeting. The bad news is I'd rather have it sooner so I can program it into the capital budget. On the Cold Brook effort, I am planning on, I think I just got on Friday, a contract from CDM to have them provide some assistance to us to help in the determination on the Cold Brook project with HCT, Harwich Conservation Trust. Harwich Conservation Trust owns that property. We are having a little bit of a disagreement in terms of Harwich Conservation Trust would like to create marshland. We would like to have more of a lake system. The lakes are much more efficient at removal of nitrogen and phosphorus. So for us, lakes are important. The bog system is just, it's a less proven technology or a less proven method. So that is something that we've been having a little bit of a disagreement on. So we will try to work on that and come to some resolution. So we are having some discussions with HCT, and I think I've reported to the board probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, that we did have some folks about grant potential on there for the culverts. So on the status report on kind of the wastewater projects and the phase 2, specifically we do need to have for this coming town meeting the funding request for the construction of the sewer system. So I think one component which we heard tonight that I do not believe that it would be necessary for us to put forward a loan system if we have the county as a vehicle to do that. So I think that at least as part of an education system for the construction part of the project, that we can say that the county piece, and I will have that on our website for people to be able to link up. I know actually in the office we've received about probably 8 to 10 calls from individual homeowners about what does this all mean. So I've been working my way through chatting with people about it. Some people just don't know about the program. Other people have very specific questions about what's going to happen in my front yard and so on. So working through those.
So I had somebody ask me that question, which is when it comes time to do the connection to the house. And so it sounded like with the commission here saying about the application to get the loan and such, that you would hire your own contractor?
Yes.
Okay, so that will be the way it goes, is that you'll get your own contractor to do the actual excavation of your
Yeah,
yard?
I think the model that, the way the program has been designed and the model that we're headed down that path is that we would do the work in the street and provide a stub. And then Chatham has a requirement that only licensed contractors, and they do require a plan to be submitted for homeowners to be able to connect in and how they're going to connect in. Initially, I kind of was thinking that the plan may be a little bit of overkill, but in some instances, you're going to have people that would have a gravity system, which would be fairly straightforward. But in people that have a pump station, a grinder pump, that would be their obligation. That's why it would be a range of, when we say an average of 5 to 7, a gravity system may be 3 to 5, a pump may be 7 to 10, and it averages to 5 to 7 for everybody. But I know I got an email just yesterday saying people did not want the engineers to come onto their property and get the sill elevations. And, I think the person owned about 5 or 6 properties. By not allowing us on, what that's gonna probably necessitate is we put the pipe in the street and leave it up to the homeowner to figure out how to get there. And if, for instance, there are some occasions where we could put in a small grinder pump for 4 to 5 homes, so no individual home has to have it, and we could do a small cluster system, for lack of a better term, and save people a whole lot of money.
Right.
But if you're not gonna let us go onto the property and let us do the engineering that needs to be done to make some of these decisions, it's gonna be kinda to the homeowner's detriment, in my opinion, that, you know, they'll have to figure it out, how they're gonna get from their house to the street. That was one homeowner. I just want to be clear. It's not the majority by any stretch. Most people have been pretty favorable received.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Larry, you want to talk about?
I do. I just wanted to, if I may, follow up the discussion that we just went through. Because I'm in the neighborhood. I'm one of the 600 homes that's going to
Me
be.
too. I
that's
got
going-
my letter.
That's going to be, and in my neighborhood, part of the, part of it obviously was a connection cost discussion that we went through tonight. The other one was the mechanics of getting it done, and I'm having more of the homeowners come to me and say, it'd be great if the town would either do it and we pay them, or organize it so that they're not hunting for contractors themselves. It's not being done piecemeal, so that when the street is done, it's done in a scheduled way. And that takes a burden off of the homeowners, and at least I've had some people in my neighborhood come and say, can the town make it easy for us? We pay for it.
Right.
Can they organize and get, who's gonna do it, schedule it, so we're not, Joe's not doing it tomorrow and Sally's doing it 3 months from then.
Right.
So that's my comment on that.
I do think to that end, certainly if we have a list that you have to, you have to use a licensed drain layer, or, someone to that effect, and we have 5 or 6 people that we qualify, then I think we can certainly render that assistance to have it. And once the survey work is done, they'll figure out which sections will be done, and we should be able to give people a much better sense for the timing. And it may make sense that if the contractor is there putting pipe in the street, that maybe a contractor, a related contractor or that contractor could then do the laterals for people. So,
Yeah.
that may be.
I'm just after to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah,
Well-
I think we can research elements of that and see if that's possible.
I think to that point, though, isn't that the way Chatham did it? I think that Chatham,
We've been pretty closely monitoring how Chatham has done it, to be perfectly honest.
I just know that when I had, in my work, I've had to, deal with making sure, like, I remember one particular house, and the connections and the plans and all of that was on board before they could actually hook up, but that was all done, monitored by the town, I believe.
The more we can do for the residents, the better. I mean,
Yeah, that- well-
approved contractor list, maybe some pre-pricing.
But, well, to Larry's point, I mean, the list, I was thinking list too, but really to the point of logistics, it's better to have one
Someone in
contractor who's
charge.
gonna go street, you know what I mean? To coordinate efforts, it's, I guess that's what I thought it was all along.
Chris, under the procurement laws, can we have somebody bid the town for the project or no?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I
Would
think
help.
if we do that, and we'd have to pay them prevailing wage if they're doing work for us.
Thank you.
I think having a list of credible
better.
vendors is probably the better
Larry, will you do
approach.
an overview on the
I will.
tri-town?
I'd like to do an overview on the Tri-Town, and then briefly an overview on the collaborative.
Before we go past
Go ahead.
this point, actually, what it sounds like you're advocating, and there is a provision for it under the law, is it would be similar to when you do a road that's a private road and it's a betterment. I mean, we're actually requiring these people, I mean, there's a way of capturing that by us contracting and then billing back against the houses.
Yeah, I think the
Which
betterment
would be
process.
kind of in the aggregate that you're talking about, instead of 1-1-1-1, you just contract the block.
Actually, the
I just
neighbors
wanna
could
make it
get
simple.
together and certainly do that.
Well, I'm advocating that we might be able to do that.
Well, to that
As a
point,
betterment.
I think that as the indication I said, if we have 5 homes that are on the end of a cul-de-sac, and they all are required to have pumps, the town, and that's what I'm kind of getting at, if people give us the ability to go on and do that work, we can look, and in those areas, we could do a town-owned pump that the neighbors would feed into by gravity. So where we have those opportunities to be able to be more cost-effective and keep it within the project and save the homeowners, that's what the value of that survey work is gonna be key.
Yeah, 'cause it shouldn't all be singles.
Yeah, if we can avoid it.
Michael, if I may, as part of the wastewater discussion, I'd like just give a couple comments on the collaborative,
Has anything to do with our wastewater project? If not, we'll bring it back. Just, I'm
I know we're getting
sensitive
short
about
on
getting-
time.
Well, and also sensitive about getting outside of the agenda, that's all. Go ahead, starting if I think.
If you think we're out. What I wanted to say is we had our Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative, our last meeting, we had a presentation by the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, which is now wants to be known as Center for Coastal Studies, not Provincetown. And for those of you that are interested, on their website is a table of all the water monitoring data of a bunch of sites on the Cape. And a lot of people are interested in what's going on in water data. And I gave them recently, because I have that Harwich data. The other part that I think might be interesting is we've had a lot of discussions on the 208 plan that we're in compliance with. The collaborative itself is has regenerated or reformed, whatever the term is, and is now an official part of that 208 process. So we review the data going into it, funding sources, the town plans as part of the 208. So we've become the advisory committee for that process. It's controlled. There's a member from each town, 2 county members on the collaborative is a reformation. There's a steering committee of
Larry,
4 people.
we'll bring this back.
Okay.
That's way outside, thank you.
We, as was indicated by Chris, and Michael was there as well. We met with the Tri-Town, which is Dennis, Harwich, and Yarmouth, to go talk about the potential of regionalizing the sewer plant all 3 towns can use. We had a presentation by a fellow from Norton and Mansfield. That the 3 towns are Norton, Mansfield, and Foxborough, and they gave us a brief discussion of the pitfalls of getting 3 towns to work together. And as much difference in us, all 3 towns weren't completely friends when they started the process, and I guess became more or less friendly during it. The take-home lesson on that was, for me at least, that regionalizing sewer plant did not take away any local authority for the town actions on either how they're organized or how they handle their collection systems. And that was key to making it make it work. They didn't try to overstep their authority and tell the towns, and also working out the percentage of payment. And interesting enough, Chris, they came into, Michael, they came into, all of you, they came in some of the same discussions about what's the plant worth when part of it's already been funded by grant money. Mm-hmm. And of course, that was discussion with us in Chatham, and they worked that out. Our next topics, we'll start looking at what would the spatial legislation look like to move forward, and talk about how to best communicate. We have a lot of different, each town has their own interest in communication and their own concerns, and we have to be careful that we work together to communicate and tell people what we're doing and be transparent. And we'll meet again next month.
Good summary. It was a very positive meeting. A lot of thoughtful questions and a lot of information. Okay, moving on to the wastewater implementation committee charge. Thank you, Larry Ballantyne, who took a stab at starting it. The current wastewater implementation committee I think right now doesn't really have any direction. I think that might be fair to say, right? I mean, we have a fairly lengthy charge, but my understanding is the meetings are uneventful, and
Right.
we talk about invoices for
Not
seating
scheduled
and-
at the moment.
So, you know, one important thing is that we continue, and we did a very good job last year, pre-town meeting and for the year, getting the information to the public and really moving forward. And I think the town of Harwich is one of 4 communities, or in the top 4 communities on forward motion on wastewater, which the message from One Cape from the Conservation Law Foundation was, they want actions, they don't want to talk. So Larry took a stab at a new wastewater implementation committee, which he titled Wastewater Technical Advisory Committee. It's in your packet. Larry, why don't you go ahead and give us an overview?
Well, I started off with wastewater advisory committee, then decided WAC was not a good,
Acronym.
and so I added technical to at least break that up. So that was my first major decision. Broadly speaking, I listed background, because we've had a couple different committees that have been very successful, voluntary committee getting us this far. But as we move into implementation, I think we now need to look at town staff taking over that, because we're talking about engineering, construction, you know, more details than what I think a voluntary committee can do per se. We still want I think a voluntary committee to advise our actions going forward is still critical. For reasons I've stated here, we now need your expertise. We need the local input. You know, hopefully we get members spread across town and interests, so we get the input from everyone going forward. The charge, I don't think I'll read it all, but is to look at, coordinate with public, look at the water monitoring program, which is absolutely critical for us. They've been working for a long time developing a database. That should continue, you know, collecting water and getting the data. That's critical how we move ahead. Advise the town administrator, board of selectmen on wastewater cost allocations. You know, we have a lot of financial experts, but in the end, that still is critical about how people feel about it. And so I've tried to put the requirements in as advisory, but also coming back to us. Charter revisions, a lot of this stuff as we go forward in terms of land use, possibly zoning, actions on how we organize, may take some charter discussions. And they should also have an input into that. And, you know, Don's saying they're in the charter committee, but that's a critical, I didn't want to forget that. And, you know, aggressively, assertively, I guess is the more politically correct term, but we should be seeking funding as we go forward. I will say that one discussion item in here that for me is critical, and I'm not sure you all agree with it, but I do want, if it moves to a staff position, I want a single staff person to be responsible for it. I'm always very concerned when you have multiple people responsible for something. That, you know, they can delegate part of that, but in the end you need someone, and that's why I wrote this in the charge. The committee, I tried to follow the charter rules of 3 years staggered to be appointed that way. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully that's an outline of it, and I look forward to your comments.
Thank you. So, Chris and I were supposed to meet at some point with Dan Pelletier and the water commissioners to discuss a landing spot for all of the information that we have so far, which we have not done yet. You know, looking at this, 2 different committees in my mind maybe merged into one here, but the Technical Advisory Committee, I couldn't agree more that for Phase 2, we're at a point where volunteers should not be doing this. It should be managed by Chris, and Chris, stop me if I'm wrong, but and Dan Pelletier, who we hired as a wastewater superintendent. So ultimately, Dan Pelletier's name should be all over this.
Yeah.
So for Phase 2, I think you're right. I think town engineer, planning, real estate and open space, Chris, Dan Pelletier, and maybe 1 or 2 community members at large.
Yeah.
Or leave the community members at a different name, the Wastewater Implementation Committee, and start charging them with Phase 3, Phase 4, and alternatives, and give them a separate charge. But we should transition this at this point into a team of people, Chris, to work on this. And I know the spreadsheet was one thing that, you know, in our approval, we really have to track that spreadsheet, and it shouldn't be any citizen. And Chris, I believe you mentioned there's a way to set the spreadsheet up online where it's color-coded and things can't be deleted, but somebody can add something and then they can be finalized.
Yes, we could do that.
So my notes on this were, and my notes would help, but the staff help with engineering, construction, and then the changing. I've got a bunch of edits on here I don't want to go through, Larry, but
If you can email to me.
yeah, the town administrator will manage wastewater implementation in accordance with the CWMP. A Harwich town employee will be assigned responsibility. So kind of define for what that town employee, and I'm guessing that would probably be Dan Pelletier.
Dan Pelletier, yeah.
Right. So I'll send you the notes, and maybe you and I can kind of come up with a more defined, if that's the direction the board thinks they want to go. Julie?
I just had a question on that, because you're making me think about the fact that I agree that we should have somebody, you know, controlling all that. But one other thing I think we should think about is whoever that person is that they're responsible also for sort of putting those most topical issues that we're dealing with. For example, I was looking for the plan of Phase 2 today, and I had to really kind of search. And I know that the wastewater stuff is like right there, but what for the specific plan I was looking for, it was hard to find. So I just think that as the phases go, if we could just have a direct link, like, or even just say the map is here, you know what I mean? Just so people can see it and understand, okay, this is the next phase, this is my house is in it, or it isn't in it, because we have so much information, and it's all great information, but for the taxpayers, they don't want to read all of that all the time. So if we have somebody like that who could be responsible for sort of updating it constantly.
What are the board's thoughts on the current wastewater implementation committee? I mean, at some point, do we dissolve that charge, or do we continue to allow them to schedule a meeting out and go and not have a whole lot to talk about? Larry?
Well, you've taken a slightly different direction than what I was thinking. My thinking was to dissolve the current wastewater implementation committee and have this advisory committee, if you will, take the place of that and advise the overall process. And so that they may not be, you know, Dan Pelletier may in fact have all the people you talk about putting it together, but he or, you know, maybe a couple of them would come to this advisory committee, technical advisory committee, once a month, wherever the process is for that advising going forward. I didn't see it as being two separate committees.
Okay.
I saw it as one.
Chris, would you like a memo from Larry approved by the board, kind of just giving you that, because it ultimately should be you that sets it up?
Yeah, I guess I have a little different take. You know, considering when I first started, I helped put together the wastewater implementation committee as it was reformed 3.5 years ago, or whatever it was at this point. I do think, Mr. Chairman, that, you know, the direction that I thought we were headed is similar to you, that I think that there's elements that we need to have in there. The CWMP compliance elements can be done by Dan Pelletier and start to evolve into having the water department / wastewater start to be formed. And how do we do the charter elements on that? How do we get that formally set up? And then to get those elements, the update on the different different milestones as we achieve them. I think there is a role for the committee to continue to perform. I don't like the 7 people from 7 parts of town. I kind of disagree with that, because, you know, if you have one person that represents East Harwich and all the other sections are not in the plan yet, I think there's too much opportunity for people that aren't going to have as vested an interest in that. But I think that the committee, I thought that the road was going to be that having a outside group help with some of the literature that we did to get through town meeting this year and do that education piece is important. and somebody to kind of look at the information and say, oh, you don't have the planning stuff updated yet. I think that would be helpful to kind of have people that would kind of monitor the progress. And the main thing, we're still going to have to ask for $20 million, plus or minus, for the project. So the education piece is by no means, I think, done. So that piece needs to be continued for at least this year.
Larry?
Yeah, if you look through the charges, I tried to leave all those charges in there, doing those activities. I agree they're very important. The main thrust of this was, again, to have the committee still do those activities, basically they're doing now, but as an advisory to town staff going forward. So there'd be that component, I guess, added to what they're doing, but all those are critical. And so I wasn't trying to back away from any things you said on that.
Okay.
I did, I rewrote the part about the membership, having it at large and then the towns, and I'll take whatever the board. The reason I, in the end, tried as much as possible to spread it out is even though it's concentrated in one area, we're asking the entire town to pay for it. And so I was trying to be sure with the idea that we have, concerns come up to the advisory that comes back to the town, that may broaden the input into it. I went back and forth on that, quite frankly. But all the other parts that you've suggested, I wanted to leave in here as being part of this activity.
Chris, can you send your comments back on this to me, and then Larry, maybe you and I can work through
Right.
this? I think that Phase 2 really has transitioned into Town Administrator Dan Pelletier and whoever Chris picks for his team. I do think that there is still, for all of the elements in here, room for a committee. I do think we should drop that committee from 7 to 5, and dissolve the current committee with a very huge thank you, and if you want to be on the new committee, but
Yeah.
really look at Phase 3 and alternatives and fertilizer and marketing, and really put a detailed charge together on how we can get to that next step. So with the board's permission, Larry and I tackle this.
Yep. Sharon?
Sharon, microphone, please.
Sharon Flieger, part of the wastewater committee. I put that spreadsheet together, all right, that you all have with different modifications. And I think the direction that you're heading with a more technical committee is going to make more sense, all right? And I see that as the committee going forward, or a new one, and maybe 3 people from the town that might help in getting, let's say, the new information together for the next meeting on what needs to be done for the next installment. I think they could help with some of the minor things that need to be done. When you talk about the education for fertilizer and some of the other things that are going to be needed, when you look through that chart, I don't think most of the people in the committee or in the town are equipped to handle that. I think you're going to need people from the planning board. You're going to need people from research and open space. You need people from conservation, because all that information, and whether they meet once a month or every 6 weeks, that information gets fed into that spreadsheet, all right? A committee that's just all town people, we don't get that information. We're going to be, we're tied. We can't do anything. We're just strictly for recommendations. So I think going the route of more technical people, and like Dan Pelletier and some of the people that are actually going to be working and doing this, is really where this should go. And this is, I'm not speaking for the committee, I'm speaking for myself on
Thank
this, having been part of this. I think there's a minor role for some volunteers, but personally, I don't even think we need 5. I think 3. And then working with whatever committee you decide to put together, and we can help them do some of the smaller projects. But I think these are bigger projects now that need to be handled by town people or, the water department, something to that effect. But that's just my thought, having been on that committee for only a year. All right, I didn't do most of the work. The rest of the committee really gets the credit for that. But I think going forward, I think you need something more specific.
Great.
All right.
Chris, you'll send me your thoughts, and then Larry and I will work on
Yes.
it from there. Thank you. Cable funds discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on this, I asked for this to be pulled off the agenda before, and I have had a subsequent meeting with the Monomoy folks and have reached a resolution. Basically, not really a big issue. I had just reminded them that they're looking for half of a split for TV studio. Under cable access, we receive funds for public education and government work, and they do have, in my opinion, a valid right to ask for some of their costs. So these are costs related to the operation of their TV studio, including some of the labor costs to install some of the equipment in. They had submitted it as a 72-37%, consistent, where 72-27. Consistent with how the agreement works. And I said, no, if it's a studio, we've been doing 50-50 with Chatham, so they changed it, so they revised it down to the 50-50. So this is, anytime we expend money out of the cable fund, it requires a board vote, the way this town does it. So the request here is to reimburse the Monomoy school system for FY17, so this is for last year, $8,900 and let's just say $50 to contribute our portion to improvements to the TV studio.
Questions from the board, Larry?
None.
Julie?
None.
Janelle? No. Don? Can I get a motion on that?
Move we approve the invoice with a 50-50 split.
Second.
Is that enough, Chris?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.
ICMA TV promotional video for Harwich in the amount of $17,000.
Yeah, this is one that kind of came up out of the blue, and I just want to, pretty rarely do I ever do this, but in my last community, I had a private business that had contracted with a promotions company to do a promotional video targeted around that private business. And they met with me and they said, can we, I asked them, can we expand it into a promotional piece for the town? And we went and we did that, about, I think, similar in length, 5 to 7 minutes. And I wanted to have it that when you come to the website, why select that community? ICMA is a group, International City Managers Association, of which I've been a member, I think, almost the entire time I've been in this business. They have a annual trade show. I don't know if, it was only 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know if a couple people went or not in Boston. But they literally, it says international. It's really Western Europe, the U.S., and Australia, New Zealand area. But they have decided, they introduced this, I think, last year, a concept to promote towns, innovative towns and creative towns. And they have different size categories, and they decided to pick Massachusetts. I don't honestly know why they picked Harwich as one of the ones that they're considering doing. But I think it's a really good opportunity to be able to take, and what the end product would be, they come out and they do a day's worth of shooting, and then it's not their product, it's our product. So they would have it as part of the trade show. The trade show this year, or the conference this year, is down in San Antonio, Texas. So we would be a featured community. And when he asked me what innovative and creative ideas have you done, I emphasized wastewater and the tourist industry, how we are making a effort, and we are, I think, from the One Cape, kind of leading that charge. And at the end, once they promote that, and they will keep it not only at the trade show when people will be there, where obviously a lot of business people would be there, but they also leave it on the ICMA TV channel for a year. The value is all the films that they give us, they will give us a final end product to promote the town from a business development standpoint. But then we also can keep the material in any spin-offs we want to do. In my last organization, we did spin-offs where we did an element of recreation, the recreation elements to, like in our case, Red River Beach, kind of highlight some of those. So when people come to the site, I'm trying to remember, I'm sure my memory's not 100% on, but I thought I came up with about $10,000 for our piece in the last one. What I would recommend, and they are looking for, they want to try to capture this. The trade show is in September, so this would be work that they want to come out and do in fairly short order. So really over the next 30 to 60 days, so they need an answer sooner than later. My thought process would be to go to, well, I have money in the budget for consulting that I originally envisioned using for wastewater consulting, but I would approach the Finance Committee to reimburse us a portion, have potentially cable where we would get the value of the material that would be presented. We could continue to reuse on our cable station to promote the town, and then seek if there are other partners that would have some interest in participating. So the concept is, do we want to do a kind of a higher level of professional production? And I mean no disrespect at all to our cable folks, but a higher level of production, and to get this material and to pay, this not only pays for the production, but also it covers the advertising. So all the advertising they would do. I know this is kind of an unusual and short order ask, but I do think, at least in my experience, this is worthwhile, and I wouldn't bring it up if I didn't think
Chris,
it
I
was
can put this back
worthwhile.
on the agenda for the August 7th meeting. That's enough time. It's a non-resident taxpayers meeting, but I do plan on doing a few other items that night.
I think they have other towns that are ready to go.
Okay.
So if I don't give them some kind of indication, then they'll move on.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of look at this as more or less like a zero-based budget thing. I'm not starting from, we spend like $30–40 million a year, and this isn't that much money. My question is, really, what's the value? I mean, other than it being self-congratulatory. You're talking about it, really, I mean, you're talking about it recruiting. I've always supported the articles for the Chamber of Commerce and business development, but I mean, I fail to see how making a really polished video and putting it online would result in us having somebody plunk themselves into Harwich because, wow, I want to be there with my company. I'm just saying.
I'm Googling ICMA TV as we speak, and I'm just going to say no.
You're going to tell you
Enough
what you
said.
find.
Enough said.
I think maybe it's a good thing to give to Zudi and they can put it on there.
That's who I was thinking of.
I think the chamber's here. Maybe the chamber will pay for this for us. Larry? We did give the chamber 30.
For $17,500, I mean.
All right, Larry?
But the charge was 17,000?
$17,500.
Yeah, I'll probably vote no now. I'd like to see promotion because I'm not quite as cynical as Don. I think it helps not only
Really? Cynical?
promote. I think it helps promote our own residents too when they look at that. But I'd like to see a little more definition of it.
I think it's a great idea, but I think with the lack of time, Chris, it's fast. There's nothing I can look at, and I don't think I'd support it at this point. I mean, if we can get some sort of extension, I don't mind putting on the next agenda to give the board some time to look at it.
Yeah, I would like to learn
I do
more.
think the chamber should consider it in their budget, but.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
That's right. All right, so
I think-
I
No,
would
it's good.
hold for now, Chris, and we'll talk about Wednesday morning, if we can get any extension for the
Yeah,
board to
I'll
look at it.
ask.
Okay.
Westwood was the one that's already signed up.
Okay. I think that's it. So, town
I just-
administrators report.
Yeah, town administrator, just on the IMA, I did get additional information on Chatham. I thought that they were going to appoint members of their board. They are actually seeking citizen volunteers. So I just wanted to at least report that. I thought that it was just gonna be the members of their board and then the administrator, but they're picking people from the community.
They're doing, is the administrator in there? Did I read that she's in there?
Yeah, she's automatically in there,
So she's one and they're picking two?
and they're picking
And
two.
do we get 1 and 2 as well, or do we get 1 and 1?
We have, I don't think I'm automatic on there.
Okay,
I
we
think
only
I-
have 2 appointees
I
though.
volunteered to go on. If she's on, that it may make some sense.
Okay,
Or a
but
board member.
we'd only have 1 other.
We'd only have one other.
How does the board want to proceed with that? We have to pick somebody basically for the IMA board.
Yeah.
I think it's a little late at this point to advertise and interview, and do we?
Yeah, I think this is for the, 25-year life. So this
Okay.
is one that is more the long term.
I think I read they're picking their September 7th meeting.
I think if we were to start advertising and then recruit people and have them right after, I
Okay.
don't think there's an urgency to.
All right, so I'll bring this back, but the
Yeah.
goal is to find at least one and then to consider appointing Chris, because the Chatham Town Administrator is going to be
Yeah.
on the
Okay,
board,
good.
so. I think it would make sense for Chris plus one.
Yep. I'm fine with that.
Personally.
I actually covered other topics already, so I don't have anything else under my
Okay.
report.
Selectmen's report, Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Larry and Janelle and I were at the Cape Verdean. They really encouraged that to happen over and over. It was a great time, and it was very informative. At one point, I ditched over to Brooks Museum and looked at a presentation that they apparently are going to do in the middle school when they finally set up the museum that talks about Cape Verde and history. And it was a really great thing.
Great. Janelle?
And we all spoke.
Ditto.
I'm reminded why I don't dance.
Do you have anything else?
They were very good dancers.
Julie?
No, I don't have anything.
Larry?
Very briefly, as a liaison, I met with the chair of the treasure chest on Friday. As you know, or maybe I should, let me rephrase that. That can sometimes be one of our more contentious operations, treasure chest, because there's always one or two people. that
I'd
may
like to hear
wanna
Don's comments on
take,
that.
take advantage. But it was a good discussion. They're trying very hard to, as we all do in our town committees, be respectful and helpful to people. At the same time, he's trying to actually add a little more structure to the group. People, not always volunteers, now always are keeping a schedule as they should, which puts strain on everyone else. So I think they're making progress. It's a good discussion.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.